I'm Mark, 33, and I've always been the kind of guy who doesn't like to stir the pot, especially when it comes to family. I grew up with the classic older brother, younger sister dynamic. Me, the calm and steady one, and Michelle, the emotional hurricane. She's 2 years younger than me and has always had a flair for drama. In high school, she faked fainting during a pop quiz because she wasn't emotionally prepared. She used to say things like that with a straight face, too. Despite everything, I loved her. I still do, in that drained, complicated way you love someone who exhausts you, but has been in your life forever. Our parents, especially my mom, always coddled her. Michelle was the baby, the miracle girl, the one they didn't think they'd have. So when she cried, someone else paid. And when she messed up, someone else fixed it. Usually me. I've done all right for myself, software developer, married to a quiet, sharp-witted woman named Elise. We live just outside of Chicago, on our home, no kids yet. Elise is the type of person who never raises her voice, but always knows exactly what to say. She sees things in people that I miss, especially when it comes to my family. And she'd warned me about this wedding. Michelle had gotten engaged to a guy named Darren about a year ago. He was tall, smug, and always seemed like he was performing in a toothpaste commercial. He shook your hand with both of his, like he was sealing a deal instead of saying hello. My first impression wasn't great, and Elise's was worse. After they left dinner the first time we met him, she'd said, "Your sister's marrying a mirror. He only loves the way he looks next to her." I brushed it off. I didn't want to be that brother, the skeptical one, the cynic. Michelle was happy, and when she asked me, well, half assumed, really, if I could help out with some of the wedding costs, I didn't hesitate. "It's just a loan," she said over coffee one morning. "We're tight on the down payment for the venue, and the caterer's been holding the date for 3 months already." The loan ended up being $22,000. I wired it over without much fanfare. I didn't need a big thank you or any praise. I just wanted her to have her day. I'd been married 4 years, and I knew what it meant to have things go smoothly. Michelle was over the moon. She even sent me a voice note. "You're the best big brother ever. Darren says thank you, too, like a million times. We're lucky to have you." It was one of those rare moments where she sounded genuine. Elise raised an eyebrow when I told her how much I sent. "Did you get anything in writing?" "No, I trust her." Elise stared at me. "Mark, this is the woman who once asked if she could borrow your car for a weekend and brought it back with a cracked windshield and a gas tank on it." "She's my sister," I said. "She's your very expensive sister," Elise muttered. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a flurry of updates in the family group chat. Michelle had added me, our mom, dad, Darren, his parents, and her bridesmaids. Every day it was something new: florists, dress fittings, guest list debates. At first, Elise and I would scroll through the photos together at night, mostly amused. "Why does she need 5 types of roses for the centerpieces?" Elise asked once. "Is this a wedding or a botanical experiment?" But as the wedding got closer, Elise started getting quieter. She didn't say much when Michelle joked in the group chat about how Elise should just wear something simple so she doesn't clash with the bridal party. She didn't react when Darren's mother, Sandra, made a snide comment about some people just not understanding family traditions when Elise politely declined to attend the joint bridal shower due to work. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, Michelle sent me a message. Not even a phone call, a message. "Hey Mark, just a heads up. Darren's parents feel like Elise makes some people uncomfortable. It's nothing personal. Just, can you come alone? Just for the ceremony. We'll all meet up afterward and it'll be fine." I stared at it for a long time. Uncomfortable? Elise? The woman who barely speaks at family events, who always brings a gift, who handwrites thank you notes. I knew exactly what it was. Elise was smart, observant, and she didn't play along with Michelle's delusions or Darren's charm show. That threatened them. I didn't reply right away. I sat there, phone on my lap, watching the little typing bubble blink and disappear. Then another message popped up. "Please don't make this a thing. It's just one day. It's my day." I showed Elise. She just nodded, lips pressed together. "Well," she said quietly, "at least now you know where we stand." It was like a switch flipped in me. A quiet sort of clarity. Not rage, just finality. I opened the group chat, scrolled all the way up, then hit leave chat. No dramatic message. No accusations. Just gone. Michelle messaged me again 5 minutes later. "Wait, what?" I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into my online banking. The payment to the venue? It was still pending final confirmation. The catering deposit? Still reversible. The florist? My account. All three vendors had my name on the contracts. I knew because Michelle had sent me PDFs and said, "You're more organized than me. Just handle the paperwork and I'll deal with the Pinterest board." It took all of 10 minutes to start the refund process. A few clicks, a few emails. Then I shut my laptop and went to make dinner. The wedding was that Saturday. Elise and I went out for brunch. At 1:03 p.m., I got my first call, then the second, then the avalanche. By 2 o'clock, I had 143 missed calls. The last voicemail was from my mother, shrieking into the phone like a siren. "What did you do, Mark? People are standing around. There's no food, no flowers, nothing." I played it once. Then I turned off my phone, leaned back in my chair, and said to Elise, "How's the French toast?" She smiled, calm as ever. "Delicious." And that's when the texts started coming in from people I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins, friends of the family, even my old high school principal. But one message, in particular, stood out, and it was from Darren. It was exactly 4 words, no punctuation. "You'll regret this forever." I just stared at it. And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what I expected from someone like Darren, performative, melodramatic, and completely out of touch with reality. Regret? For what? Not paying for the lavish stage he and my sister wanted to parade on while they pushed my wife into the shadows? I showed Elise the message. She read it, blinked, and said, "Forever's a long time to hold a grudge when you can't afford to pay your florist." The rest of the day was quiet. We stayed off social media, turned off the TV, and went for a walk downtown. Elise bought herself a new book from a little shop tucked between a bakery and a vintage record store. I grabbed a copy of The Art of Saying No. It felt appropriate. That evening, just before bed, I checked my email, something I probably shouldn't have done, but curiosity got the better of me. There were dozens of new messages. Some were from the vendors, confirming the cancellations. Others were from Michelle. Long, rambling essays that bounced between hurt, rage, and denial. "You ruined everything," one said. "Do you know how embarrassing it was to stand in front of all those people and explain why there were no chairs set up? Why the photographer never showed up? Why the cake never came?" Apparently, they didn't even have a backup cake. Just some table of Costco cupcakes Darren's and tried to pass off as minimalist. I only know that because a mutual cousin, Olivia, sent me a picture of it, captioned, "This you?" But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Michelle and Darren had made it clear Elise wasn't welcome, and by extension, neither was I. They just hadn't expected that the money came with strings like basic human decency. The thing about growing up with someone like Michelle is that you spend years assuming their chaos is your job to clean up. And for the longest time, I did. I fixed. I paid. I forgave. But this time felt different. This time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like a villain. I felt free. My mom, of course, was livid. Her voicemail was 10 solid minutes of finger-pointing, shrieking, and some truly creative guilt-tripping. "You embarrassed your sister. You made us all look bad. Darren's parents think we're white trash now. How could you do this to family?" I didn't bother replying. But I did listen to it twice, and I have to admit, it was kind of satisfying. Like finally hearing the truth about how little they valued us until they needed us. What struck me most was how not a single message, not one, included the word sorry. Not for the way Elise was treated. Not for the message asking me to show up alone. Not for taking the money and assuming they'd earned it by default. Just blame. Just fury. Over the next few days, word spread. I started getting messages from distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were shocked, others secretly impressed. One aunt even said, honestly, it was about time someone stood up to Michelle. Apparently, my sister's pattern of entitlement didn't stop at me. But the real kicker came a week later. My dad called. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail calm, tired, and heavy with something that almost sounded like regret. "Mark, your mom's been crying for days. Michelle won't talk to us. Darren's threatening legal action. I just want to understand what happened. Maybe we can fix this. Call me back." That one I did listen to 3 times. But I didn't call him back. Because I knew what would happen if I did. They'd try to twist it. Make it my fault. Spin the narrative until I was the bitter brother who ruined a wedding out of spite. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was that I made a choice. A quiet one. A simple one. I chose Elise. And after years of choosing them, of choosing peace at the cost of my own dignity, that felt like the only decision worth making. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because the refund wasn't the only surprise I left them with. See, while the $22,000 refund was the headline, it wasn't the full story. What Michelle and Darren didn't know, what no one in my family knew, is that I hadn't just been the financial backer for their wedding. I had been the legal organizer. The paperwork, the contracts, the vendor deposits, all filed under a business entity I quietly owned, a small event planning LLC I started a few years ago when Elise and I briefly toyed with side gigs. It was meant to be a low-risk experiment. We'd helped a friend plan a fundraiser once, and Elise said, "You know, you're good at logistics. If we ever wanted extra cash, you could run small events under a company." So I did. It never turned into much, just sat dormant in a file drawer and had a basic checking account with my name on it. But when Michelle had asked me to handle the paperwork, I saw a chance to make everything cleaner, safer, controlled. So I routed the contracts through the LLC. Every payment, every booking, every signature. And that meant one very important thing. When Darren threatened legal action, he'd be threatening the wrong person. Any refund dispute wouldn't come to me, it'd go through a corporate email account tied to a legal entity in good standing. They had no idea I'd shielded myself, that I had receipts, that if they tried to lie, I had signed documents with timestamps, and that they had technically signed off on my terms that clearly stated the booking party, that's me, could cancel at any time prior to final confirmation. But I didn't do all that to protect myself from a lawsuit. No, I did it because I learned something after years of being the family fixer. Fixers don't get thank yous. They get used. And I was tired of being used. The Monday after the wedding, I got a call from Michelle. I didn't answer, but she left a message. Not yelling this time. Not angry. Just a soft, slow, sniffling voice saying, "I can't believe you would humiliate me like that. In front of everyone. I was your sister. I am your sister. And you let her come between us." I stared at the phone, sitting on the table next to my coffee mug. Elise was across from me, legs tucked under her, reading. I hit play again, volume low. When it ended, I didn't say anything. Just took a sip of my coffee. After a while, Elise looked up. "Do you feel bad?" I thought about it. I really thought about it. Because the old me would have. He would have replayed her words a dozen times. Tried to see it from her perspective. Blamed himself. But this time? No, I said finally. Not even a little. And that's when the real fallout began. Because Darren's parents? Oh, they were furious. Not just at the cancellation, but at how it made them look. What kind of family pulls out last minute like that? They apparently said to my mom. It's classless. Low. Vindictive. And Sandra, his mother, the one who said Elise didn't understand traditions? She tried to spin it into some martyr narrative, telling guests that they had offered to pay for everything but were ignored. A cousin sent me the audio from a post-wedding brunch rant where she actually said, "Honestly, we should have known better than to rely on his kind of people. Quiet types are always hiding something. My kind of people." Elise just laughed when she heard it. I should put that on a tote bag. Then came the text from my dad. Not a voicemail this time. Just a single line. "You've embarrassed this family more than you'll ever understand." I read it, then deleted it. Because I do understand. I understand that they only ever saw me as a bank with arms. I understand that Elise was never going to be welcomed, no matter how polite or graceful she was, because she didn't play their game. I understand that love, real love, doesn't come with an invoice. And I understand that they still haven't figured out the last piece of the puzzle. Because there's one more thing they don't know. The venue they thought they booked wasn't just some popular lakeside estate Darren had found on Instagram. It was my property. Well, mine and Elise's. We bought it 3 years ago, fully paid in cash after a startup payout as an investment. It used to be an old winery, but the location was so gorgeous and the grounds so immaculate, we turned it into a rentable event space and hired a manager to run it under a different name. We didn't advertise it to family. No pictures. No bragging. Just a smart asset. And when Michelle sent me a list of top dream wedding venues, ours was third. I smiled when I saw it and quietly arranged the booking. Under a different name, through a planner they didn't know was me. They never realized they were standing in the middle of my land. They never knew that every insult, every whispered jab, every smug glance they cast across the room that day was being thrown on soil I owned. And when the wedding unraveled, when the music stopped, the food didn't arrive, and the guests left in silence, they blamed everyone but the man who built the stage. They still don't know, but they will. Because next week, I'm putting up a new sign at the venue's entrance. New ownership. Private events only. Family discount suspended indefinitely. And I'll be mailing them a copy of the invoice they never bothered to read, along with a formal notice of venue policy. No outside guests allowed without invitation. No bookings accepted without pre-approval. No exceptions. But that's just the beginning. Because Michelle and Darren's wedding wasn't the only thing I canceled that weekend. And they're about to find out what else disappeared, without notice. The second cancellation wasn't as flashy. It didn't involve guests or flowers or gourmet appetizers. It involved a quiet signature I'd withdrawn from a joint financial agreement. Michelle didn't just come to me for help with the wedding. 6 months before that, she'd also come to me with a business opportunity. Something life-changing, as she put it. She and Darren wanted to start a boutique home decor brand. Rustic, elevated, timeless were her exact words, which she repeated as though they were a magic spell that would make investors materialize. It was the kind of thing that might have worked if they had experience, or a plan, or, frankly, a shred of realism. But they had enthusiasm. And, more importantly to Michelle, they had me. Mark, she'd said over brunch one day, twirling a spoon in her coffee like she was stirring fate itself, you know how to structure things. You can handle the admin. All I need is your support. Just to get it off the ground. As a co-signer. Not even your money, just your name. Elise had asked questions. Michelle dodged most of them. Darren, of course, had been eager. We've already got a supplier in Bali and a deal lined up with a design blogger who gets, like, 80K views per day. We just need help securing the business credit. It was supposed to be a favor. Something passive. Michelle insisted I wouldn't have to do anything once it was set up. So, reluctantly, I agreed. We filed a partnership agreement, opened a business line of credit, and I added my name to the LLC they created, Woven Roots. I'd put in $0, just my signature, and in doing so, gave them access to a sizable credit line that could never have gotten a loan. I made two things clear. The business had to remain in good standing. Any expenses over $5,000 had to be run by me in writing. They never did. At the time, Elise told me she had a bad feeling about it. They'll burn through the credit line in 3 months, she warned. I gave them more credit than that, literally and figuratively. Turned out, Elise was being generous. When the wedding blew up, I went digging. Not out of spite, at least not at first, but out of curiosity. I logged into the business account portal for Woven Roots. The first thing I saw? A $7,300 charge for influencer marketing, paid to someone whose claim to fame was a 2-minute segment on a morning show in 2019. Then came charges for imported textiles that never made it out of customs, followed by a $1,500 charge to a luxury logo designer whose website used stock photos. I scrolled and scrolled. My jaw clenched tighter with each swipe. They had maxed the line. Not a dime of income. Not a single paying client. Just debt. Dressed up as brand development. But the kicker? They'd use some of that credit, not cash, credit, to book things for the wedding. Dresses for Michelle's bridal party. A weekend getaway strategy meeting that just so happened to take place at a Napa Valley spa. Even Darren's tux, ordered from an ethical tailor in Paris. All billed to Woven Roots. That violated the terms of our agreement 6 ways from Sunday. So I called the bank, removed myself from the LLC with documentation of the breach, and froze the account pending investigation. The process was already in motion by the time Michelle's post-wedding rage texts came flooding in. And then came the moment I'd been dreading and, strangely, looking forward to. The call from Darren. It was 10:12 a.m. on a Wednesday. Elise was reading on the couch. I answered. "Mark," he said, his voice clipped and tight. "We need to talk." I waited. I just got off the phone with the bank. They said the account's frozen. What's going on? I didn't speak. "Mark," he said again, firmer this time, "this is affecting our business." "That's the thing," I said, calm as a pond. "It's not our business anymore." "What does that mean?" "It means you broke the terms of the agreement. I have it in writing. The partnership's dissolved, and the financial liability's yours now." Silence. Then a hollow laugh. "You think you can just walk away? You're on those contracts. You're liable too." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "No, Darren. I was on the contracts. But not anymore. I have dated documentation, emails showing unauthorized use of funds, and a withdrawal filed and approved by the bank. You and Michelle? You're the only ones left holding the bag. You'll ruin her," he snapped. "She's an adult," I said. "She made her choices." He didn't reply right away. but I could hear his breathing. Fast, uneven, rage building. Then he growled, "This family is done with you." I almost thanked him. It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in over a year. After I hung up, I sat for a while. Just sat. Let it wash over me. All of it. The betrayal. The silence. The relief. And then I laughed. Not out of cruelty. Out of peace. Because for once, I wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. I was letting them sit in it. But that wasn't the last message I got. Because that night, as Elise and I sat down to dinner, a notification lit up my phone. It was a video from a guest at the wedding. And what I saw in that clip changed everything. It wasn't the venue. It wasn't the empty tables. It was Michelle standing at the altar, eyes wide, mouth open. Because someone had walked in. Someone she hadn't expected. And when I saw who it was, my blood ran cold. Because whatever I thought was over, wasn't. Not even close. The video was short, just under 30 seconds, but every frame was seared into my brain. Michelle stood at the altar, in full bridal glam, looking like someone who'd just been sucker-punched mid-sentence. Around her, guests murmured, confused, some glancing toward the back of the venue. Then the camera panned. And there he was, my father, wearing my tuxedo. It was the one Elise and I had tailored together for my cousin's wedding 2 years ago, midnight navy, slim cut, subtle embroidery on the cuffs that read M and E on the inside wrist. It was unmistakable. It had been in our coat closet for months. Or so I thought. I paused the video, stared. I knew he and Michelle had always been close. I knew he defended her at my expense more times than I could count. But this was new. This was another level entirely. "Why is he wearing your tux?" Elise asked, her voice low. "I don't know," I said. I didn't even notice it was missing. The video resumed. My dad walked past stunned guests like he owned the place, straight toward the altar, stopping just shy of the steps. Michelle whispered something, and he nodded solemnly. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. Her eyes skimmed it, then she blinked furiously and laughed. Laughed, like something had been solved, like I'd just been erased. The clip cut off there. No context, no explanation. But I didn't need any. Elise watched me carefully. "You think that was a backup?" I said flatly. He took my tux. Probably fed her some story about how this wedding wasn't ruined. That he'd step in. That everything could still go on if they just rewrote the ending without me in it. It all made sense now. The cold voicemail. The silence. The fact that neither my mom nor Michelle had mentioned the frozen business account since. They weren't just trying to fix the wreckage. They were replacing me. And that was the moment something inside me finally broke clean. Not with anger, but with clarity. They hadn't just chosen Michelle. They'd chosen a version of events where I didn't exist. A fantasy where the quiet, dependable son could be stripped for parts, money, favors, signatures, and then left behind like old scaffolding after the building's finished. They weren't crying over me. They were crying because I stopped being useful. 2 days later, I mailed a letter. No texts. No dramatic voicemails. Just a plain envelope with one typed page. I sent it to Michelle, my parents, and Darren. The letter read, "As of today, I'm officially withdrawing from any and all personal and financial commitments connected to this family. This includes the wedding, the business venture, and future involvement in family events. You may consider all ties dissolved. Do not contact me for money, support, mediation, or apologies. I am no longer interested in playing the role I've been assigned. I've made peace with what I've done. I hope, one day, you can do the same. This is not a grudge. It's a boundary." Then I signed it. Mark E. Afterward, I took Elise's hand and we booked a flight. One way. To Lisbon. It wasn't planned. We just opened a map and pointed. We stayed in a quiet Airbnb with white curtains and ocean wind and a little espresso machine that Elise used every morning like clockwork. I didn't check my email. I didn't open group chats. I didn't care about how many more calls or texts came in after the letter. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. About a month later, I got one last message. From Olivia, my cousin. Just a single text. "They're still trying to fix it. Darren left. Michelle moved back in with your parents. The business is done. And your dad still wears that tux. It's weird." I smiled, then muted the thread. Some endings don't come with closure. They come with distance. And sometimes, that's the healthiest revenge of all. Not screaming. Not exploding. Just walking away so calmly that they can't tell if you're gone. Or just never looking back. I didn't ruin Michelle's wedding. They did. I just took my name and my money off the guest list. And it turns out, without those, there wasn't a wedding to begin with. I never thought my own father would drag my suitcase to the front door like I was some stranger who overstayed their welcome at a motel. But then again, I should have seen it coming. The warning signs were there for years. I just kept brushing them off, telling myself, that's just how Dad is. You know, stubborn, old school, doesn't show emotions unless it's disappointment. I'm Sean, 26, and until 3 weeks ago, I was living in the guest room of the house I grew up in. Emphasis on was. For context, I didn't exactly have a dramatic fall from grace. I wasn't partying every night or mooching off my parents without a second thought. I had a job, remote, freelance web development, which wasn't always consistent but paid enough to keep me afloat. When the lease on my old apartment ended last year and the rent doubled overnight, my parents offered, more like suggested, I moved back home for a bit to save money. I didn't really want to. I knew living with them again in my mid-20s would be, let's say, complicated. But I agreed, thinking it would just be temporary. 6 months, max. That was the plan. At first, it was okay. Mom was thrilled to have me around again, or at least she pretended to be. She'd cook dinner and asked me to join her while she watched her cheesy medical dramas. Dad was more reserved but civil. We had this unspoken truce. I stayed out of his way, and he stayed out of mine. It worked, until it didn't. The first time I felt something shift was during a Sunday lunch. Mom made roast chicken, the kind she knew I loved, and we were all seated at the table, me, her, and Dad, who was already 2 beers in by the time I sat down. Somewhere between passing the mashed potatoes and refilling his glass, he looked at me and said, in this weirdly casual tone, "So, when do you plan on getting a real job?" I blinked. "I have a job." He snorted. "Freelancing isn't a job. That's just being unemployed with extra steps." I laughed awkwardly, assuming he was joking. He wasn't. Mom tried to defuse it. "Come on, Joe. It's different now. Everyone works from home." But he wouldn't let it go. If he's working so much, how come he's home all day, every day? No calls, no clients visiting, no boss. Just him in his room, playing on that computer. "It's coding, Dad," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I build websites. I work with clients remotely." "Right?" he muttered, stabbing his chicken. "Building websites. Like a hobby." That exchange stuck with me for days. I didn't say anything, didn't bring it up again. But the tension started growing after that. He'd make little digs whenever we crossed paths in the hallway. Stuff like, "You know, when I was your age, I already had 2 kids and a mortgage." Or, "Must be nice, living here rent-free while the rest of us break our backs." I try to laugh it off, but there was always this lump in my throat after. It's strange how fast you can feel like a stranger in your own home. Mom didn't say much. She'd give me these sad, tight-lipped smiles and change the subject whenever things got awkward. But I could tell she was slipping back into old habits. Peacekeeping, keeping Dad from blowing up, pretending everything was fine. She'd ask if I needed anything at the store, but she never defended me directly. Not really. Then came the comment that really stung. I had just wrapped up a huge client project. A full e-commerce redesign that took me 3 weeks and paid me more than what Dad probably thought I was worth in a month. I mentioned it casually over breakfast, feeling kind of proud. "Well," Dad said, sipping his coffee, "maybe you can finally start paying your way around here, huh?" I looked at him. "I've been buying groceries, helping Mom around the house, fixing the router every time it breaks. That's not paying your way. That's being a decent house guest." The word house guest slapped harder than I expected. It was subtle, but clear. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was a burden. A freeloader, as he would later say more explicitly. Still, I didn't argue. I didn't pack my bags and storm out. I just worked more. Saved quietly. Put money into my own joint account, one my parents didn't even know about. I kept my head down. But that silent resentment simmered, and I knew Dad wasn't going to let it go. A week later, I overheard him on the phone in the garage. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the door was open, and I heard my name. "Still here," he was saying. "I swear, Sandra, the boy has no shame. Sitting on that computer all day like he's some kind of tech guru. At this rate, he'll be 30 and still sleeping in the spare room." My stomach dropped. I stepped back quietly and went back upstairs. That was the moment it stopped being annoying and started being personal. I wasn't just overstaying my welcome. I was now a punchline in his conversations. I could feel the walls closing in. Every day became a tightrope walk. If I worked late, he'd make passive-aggressive comments about me sleeping in again. If I left the dishes in the sink, even for 5 minutes, he'd grumble about me, expecting servants. Mom just kept walking on eggshells, hoping to keep the peace. But the peace had already shattered. She just didn't want to admit it. Then came the breaking point. One Thursday afternoon, I was on a video call with a client, a big one, potential retainer for 6 months. I had my headphones in, trying to stay focused, when Dad barged into my room without knocking. "Hey," he barked, "you didn't take the trash out." I muted the call and glanced at him. I was going to after the meeting. "You've been in here all day. You can't walk 10 feet to do a basic chore." "I'm working," he scoffed. "Oh, working. Must be nice to play tech support from your bedroom and call it a career." I didn't respond. I just turned back to the screen, unmuted, and kept talking like he wasn't there. That was the last straw for him. That night, I came downstairs to grab a snack and saw both my parents waiting in the living room. Dad stood by the front door, arms crossed. My duffel bag was on the floor next to him. My backpack too. "What's going on?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "You're nothing but a freeloader," Dad snapped. "It's time you grew up. Found your own place. This isn't a shelter." I turned to Mom, hoping for some sign of support, anything. She didn't meet my eyes. Just said softly, "Maybe it's time you stopped relying on us." There was no yelling, no screaming, just this cold, calculated rejection. I stared at them for a long time, then slowly picked up my bag. I didn't argue. I just left. I didn't cry that night. Not at first. I checked into a cheap Airbnb, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. Not out of sadness, but shock. Like I'd been exiled from my own life. 3 weeks passed. I didn't reach out. Didn't respond to their texts. I just worked, harder than ever. Got the retainer deal. Picked up 2 more clients. Started setting things in motion that I had kept on the back burner for too long. Then, last Friday, my phone lit up. "Why can't we access the joint account?" It was Mom's number. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen, before replying. "Ask the freeloader." 10 minutes later, my aunt was calling and blowing up my phone. But I didn't pick up. Not yet. Because they didn't know what I had done. Not yet. And that's when things really started to unravel. I didn't respond to my aunt's calls right away. I just watched the phone ring, over and over again. The name, Aunt Delia, lighting up the screen like some kind of warning siren. First her, then Uncle Dave. Then, oddly enough, my younger cousin Amanda, who I hadn't heard from in nearly a year. Not since she borrowed $300 and then ghosted me when I gently reminded her to pay it back. That was the moment I realized something bigger was going on. But before we get there, I need to explain what they meant by joint account. Because yeah, I technically set one up a few years ago. It was supposed to be a safety net. Back when my grandfather passed, he left a small inheritance to be split between his children, which included my dad and Aunt Delia and their descendants. It wasn't millions or anything, but still a sizable amount. Enough to be life-changing if you used it right. The issue was, Grandpa didn't really trust my dad with money. Or Aunt Delia. And definitely not Uncle Dave, who once bought a motorcycle on credit during a tax audit. So instead of giving it to them directly, he gave me power of attorney over the portion allocated to our branch of the family. I was 21 at the time. Everyone agreed it was fine, just paperwork, Dad had said, waving it off. Mom even smiled proudly and told me, "He trusts you, Sean. That's special." I took it seriously. I didn't touch the money, not unless it was agreed upon. At the time, they'd occasionally use it for repairs on the house, covering an unexpected bill, helping Amanda with a semester of tuition. But over time, the requests got more frequent and sketchier. I started saying no. They didn't like that. Which brings me back to the week before everything exploded. Things had been quiet. Too quiet. No texts, no calls. Not even a "we miss you" from Mom, which I thought I'd get eventually. I told myself I didn't care, that I was used to being the scapegoat. But deep down, it hurt. Every time I saw a mother and son walking together, or even passed a family eating at a diner, something clenched in my chest. It's like they had flipped a switch, cut me out without hesitation, like I was never a part of them in the first place. Until the joint account froze. That account, the one tied to the inheritance, wasn't easy to access. Grandpa had made sure of that. Withdrawals required 2-factor authentication, which came to my phone, and a password known only to me and the estate attorney. Still, I logged in that morning just to check. Sure enough, someone had tried to transfer $8,000 out of it twice, and both were flagged as unauthorized. Then I saw it, a name that made my blood run cold. Amanda. She had somehow added herself as an authorized user, or at least tried to, which was impossible unless someone gave her my personal information. I sat there, staring at the screen in disbelief. Not even angry at first, just stunned. I had trusted them. All of them. Now I could see it clearly. This wasn't a family misunderstanding. It was coordinated. A few hours later, the texts started rolling in. Why is the account locked? We need to transfer the tuition payment. Aunt Delia. Sean, your dad said you were acting out. Please don't be vindictive. Dad. Don't ignore your family, Sean. This money belongs to all of us. Amanda. I'm just trying to finish school, you selfish jerk. I felt this tight pressure in my chest, like I'd swallowed a live wire. And then came the kicker. A message from my mom. I know your father can be harsh sometimes, but you're acting like a child. You're punishing everyone just because we asked you to grow up. That money isn't yours. That line. That money isn't yours. That's when something inside me snapped. Let me rewind just a little to paint the full picture of what I was dealing with. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. The one who didn't make waves. The one who stayed quiet during arguments and offered to do the dishes even when it wasn't my turn. Amanda? She was the golden child. Always trying her best, even when she was clearly coasting through life. She wrecked her first car? She's young. Lost a scholarship because she partied through her sophomore year? College is hard. Skipped my birthday dinner 2 years in a row because she forgot? Don't hold grudges, Sean. Every family event revolved around making her feel supported. Meanwhile, if I so much as brought up that I was stressed from work or dating trouble, the mood would shift like I was bringing everyone down. I was useful. That was my role. Quiet. Reliable. Useful. So I kept playing the part, even when I got the power of attorney. Even when they came asking for just a little bit to cover Amanda's summer in Spain or to fix the washing machine they'd been meaning to replace. It wasn't until I moved back home that I started realizing just how deep the favoritism ran. There was one night, about 2 months before they kicked me out. I was sitting in the living room, watching TV after a long coding session, when Amanda barged in, unannounced. Mom. Dad. You won't believe this, she shouted. Turns out she'd overdraft her personal checking account. Again, and her landlord was threatening to kick her out. They didn't yell. They didn't scold. They didn't ask what she spent her money on. They turned to me. Sean. Dad said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Can you help your cousin out with rent this month? I blinked. Why would I? She's family, Mom added quickly. She's just going through a rough patch. I looked at Amanda, who was already scrolling through her phone like this was settled. I don't think that's a good idea, I said slowly. We've already helped her twice this year. She needs to figure out a plan. Dad's face hardened. You're seriously going to let your own cousin get evicted? She's not getting evicted, I said. She's just going to have to deal with the consequences of overspending. You're being cold, Mom whispered, disappointed. What happened to you? And just like that, I was the villain. So yeah, when they tried to access the account without telling me, even after kicking me out, it wasn't a surprise. Not really. What was surprising was how far they were willing to go. Later that evening, I got a call from the estate attorney. I just received a strange request from your father, he said. He's asking to have the account transferred into his name. Claims you're mentally unwell. I froze. He what? He submitted a letter. Not notarized. But it accuses you of erratic behavior. Says you've been acting unstable and vindictive. Wants to assume full control of the account to protect family interests. I sat there in stunned silence. He's trying to get me removed? I finally asked. That's what it looks like, the attorney replied. I told him I wouldn't proceed without your consent. But Sean, I've seen this before. You need to be careful. They're building a narrative. My chest felt like it was imploding. That wasn't just betrayal. That was character assassination. I didn't sleep that night. I just paced the tiny Airbnb living room, rereading every text, every message, thinking back on all the times I let things slide. The birthday they forgot. The Christmas when Amanda got a MacBook and I got socks. The way Mom always said, "You're our rock, Sean," but never stood up for me. I realized something that night. I had spent my whole life trying to be the good son. The quiet one. The one who didn't ask for much. And in the end, they still saw me as expendable. That's when I stopped pacing. That's when I opened my laptop. And that's when I started pulling receipts. But what I found, that's what changed everything. And it all started with a folder labeled House Renovation 2019. Let's just say, they made a big mistake trusting me to set up the finances all those years ago. Because now I had leverage. Real leverage. But I'll get to that in the next part. Trust me, this rabbit hole goes deep. I didn't sleep after I found that folder. House Renovation 2019. It sounded so innocent. A file my dad had asked me to help organize years ago. I remembered setting up a budget spreadsheet back then, but I hadn't looked at the folder since. I only opened it now because I was trying to catalog every instance where the inheritance money had been used, above board or not. And that's when I found the receipts. Literal receipts. Invoices, bank transfers, some screenshots from payment confirmations. One of them caught my eye, a $12,000 charge to a contractor I didn't recognize. I clicked deeper. Electrical work? But wait. I remembered Dad telling me they couldn't afford to rewire the upstairs back in 2019. Said it was too pricey. Said the inheritance was off limits. So how did this invoice exist? Then came another, for $1,800 to a private design consultant. The name wasn't familiar, so I Googled it. The address traced back to a woman named Gloria, a friend of Amanda's from college. A woman who, funnily enough, had posted a bathroom remodel on Instagram around the same time, using tiles identical to the ones now in my parents' en-suite. My stomach turned. They used the inheritance. Secretly. Lied about it. Hid it. Covered it up under project labels and vague descriptions. I sat there, frozen, as the pieces fell into place. For years, I thought I was overreacting. Thought maybe I was the one being sensitive, that Dad was just old school and Mom was just caught in the middle. But this wasn't just favoritism. It was calculated misuse. They didn't just take the money. They stole it. From me. From Grandpa's memory. From the very trust they begged me to manage. And I was done. But I was also alone. That night, I hit rock bottom. I stared at my laptop screen until my eyes burned. The Airbnb was silent except for the occasional hum of traffic outside. I hadn't eaten. Hadn't showered. I just sat there, feeling hollow. Every memory. Christmas mornings, family road trips, late-night kitchen talks with Mom. All of it felt tainted. I started doubting myself. Was I overreacting again? Would anyone believe me if I went public with this? They'd paint me as ungrateful, as dramatic, as mentally unstable, just like Dad tried to tell the lawyer. It was raining outside. Hard. I stood by the window, watching water streak down the glass, and thought about Grandpa. The only person who ever truly listened to me without judgment. The man who trusted me, not because I was the loudest or most confident, but because I was steady, because I cared. And that's when something clicked. I hadn't just hit rock bottom. I'd finally hit bedrock. The part that doesn't crumble. The part you can build on. The next morning, I got up early, showered, and put on real clothes, not just sweats and a hoodie. I walked to a nearby cafe with my laptop and headphones, sat down with a strong cup of coffee, and opened a fresh document titled Rebuild. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. I made a list. Review all financial records tied to the joint account. Compile a timeline of every withdrawal and who authorized it. Track all unauthorized or sketchy payments. Get in touch with the estate lawyer about freezing the account permanently and updating access permissions. Find a new apartment. A real one. My own space. Build a new LLC for my freelance work. Separate, clean, with clear boundaries. Create a backup emergency fund in a private account. Each item on that list felt like taking a brick out of the wall they'd built around me. The rebuilding didn't happen overnight. The first week was brutal. I was still getting calls from my aunt. Amanda even sent me a voice note, fake crying, accusing me of ruining her future. I deleted it without listening twice. Mom finally left a voicemail too. She didn't yell. She just sounded tired. Sean, please. Let's talk. This isn't you. You're better than this. That line stuck with me. You're better than this. No, Mom. I was finally being exactly who I needed to be. By the second week, things started shifting. I got accepted for a quiet studio apartment on the other side of town. Small but cozy. A tiny balcony that caught the afternoon sun. The kind of place where I could breathe. I paid the deposit in full. No help. No joint anything. I opened a business bank account and filed the paperwork for my LLC, Stonebeam Digital. The name was a nod to Grandpa's old joke. Even a beam of light needs a solid foundation. Then I landed a new client. A mid-sized consulting firm that needed a long-term web developer. Steady work, great pay, and, best of all, complete respect. They didn't care that I worked from home or wore a hoodie while coding. They cared that I delivered. It was the first time in months I felt like someone saw me for my skills, not my shortcomings. Still, the silence from my parents cut deep. Not a single apology. Not even an attempt to make amends. Until the certified letter arrived. I was sitting on the floor of my new apartment, unpacking dishes, when it slid through the mail slot. Cream-colored envelope. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. My dad's. I opened it carefully. Inside was a printed letter. Not handwritten. Not personal. Printed. Sean, it's unfortunate that you've decided to take such a hostile stance toward your own family. We've tried to be patient and reasonable, but your recent actions have caused significant stress and confusion. As the original heads of this household, your mother and I believe we are entitled to continued access to the family funds. We request that you immediately reinstate joint permissions and transfer decision-making authority to a neutral third party. Your Aunt Delia has volunteered. Failure to cooperate may result in legal escalation. We are deeply saddened that it has come to this. Dad. No signature. No love, Dad. Just cold, professional distance. They were serious. And I was furious, but not panicking, because by then, I had everything I needed. The spreadsheets, the receipts, the emails, the intent. I sent a copy of the letter to the estate lawyer, along with the files I'd gathered. He called me 20 minutes later. This, he said, is exactly what we needed. I'll begin proceedings to lock down the account and open an inquiry into misuse. My hands trembled as I hung up. I wasn't scared. I was steady. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to keep the peace. I was building my own. But then, a week later, just when I thought things couldn't get any lower or any more absurd, I got an alert on my phone. Joint account activity. Except the account was supposed to be frozen. And when I checked the app, I saw a name I hadn't expected. Uncle Dave. Somehow, he had tried to reopen the account using fake credentials. And that's when I realized. This wasn't just my parents. This was the whole family. I wasn't dealing with a few manipulative relatives. I was dealing with an operation. One that was about to be exposed. And I had the matches to light the whole thing up. I didn't react right away when I saw Uncle Dave's name pop up on the account activity alert. I just stared at the notification, blinking slowly, like maybe I'd read it wrong. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was some weird glitch or some unrelated person with the same name. But no, his full name was right there. His email, too. And the IP address that tried to access the joint account from the same city he lived in. He wasn't subtle. So now Uncle Dave had entered the game. And that confirmed something I'd been trying to deny. This wasn't just about my parents. This was bigger. They were coordinating, talking behind my back, plotting. And for what? A joint account they had no legal access to? Money that was never even promised to them. I sat there for a few minutes, the light from my laptop screen flickering against the wall of my new studio apartment. The place still smelled faintly of paint and cardboard boxes. I hadn't even fully moved in yet. But suddenly, none of that mattered. Because now it was game on. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to set the record straight. And maybe, just maybe, burn a few bridges while I was at it. But this wasn't going to be a screaming match or some childish public meltdown. I didn't want vengeance with fireworks. I wanted precision. And most of all, I wanted receipts. I spent the next 3 days doing nothing but digging. I didn't work. I didn't stream. I barely slept. I just combed through every digital folder I had access to, backups, cloud storage, old email threads, documents I hadn't opened in years. I remembered how many times my parents asked me to handle the paperwork over the years. Grandpa's estate, renovation budgets, Amanda's loan agreements, which, by the way, were written like a child's wish list with zero interest or due dates. I organized everything into 4 folders. Unauthorized expenses, deception and misuse, inheritance access attempts, communication logs. Each folder had dozens of files. And as I compiled it all, I noticed something interesting, a pattern. Every time the inheritance funds were used, My parents always came up with a moral justification. Sean, this is for your home too. It's just temporary. We'll replace it next month. Amanda is family. We help family. But it was never temporary. And they never asked. They assumed. Demanded. Guilt-tripped. And I had proof. So now it was time to prepare the next step, exposure. But first, I needed someone on my side. Not a lawyer. I already had the estate attorney handling the account itself. I needed someone inside the family. Someone with knowledge, or at least influence. And weirdly enough, I thought of my cousin Ben. Ben was Uncle Dave's oldest kid. He was 29, a nurse, and had always kept his distance from family drama. He wasn't close with Amanda or my parents. And at Thanksgiving, he was usually the one sitting in the corner with headphones in, watching football on mute. We hadn't talked in years, but I remembered him being fair, quiet, but observant. So I sent him a text. Hey, I know it's random, but can I ask you something private about your dad? It took 2 hours, but he replied, Ben, you mean the recent family money nonsense? My eyebrows shot up. I typed fast. Yeah, you heard about the account. Ben, my dad's been ranting about it all week. Said you're holding everyone hostage. I didn't really know what he meant. I'm not. I'm protecting Grandpa's will. They're trying to take funds illegally. Ben, I believe you. Just like that. No hesitation. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. Do you know if your dad has copies of any documents? Or has said anything about trying to override the POA? Ben, he mentioned something about forcing a vote. Like, having the family declare you unfit to manage the estate. Total nonsense. That's illegal unless I commit fraud or go completely off the rails. Which I haven't. Ben, I know. Want me to record anything he says? I froze. Wait, you do that? Ben, if it protects Grandpa's money? Yeah. He didn't leave it to be wasted on backsplash tiles and Amanda's fake startups. I laughed. Out loud. A genuine, belly-shaking laugh. Because finally, someone saw it. Someone who wasn't trying to manipulate me, or guilt me, or keep the peace. With Ben quietly gathering intel from the inside, I turned my focus to preparation. I bought a domain, freeloaderfiles.com. I'm not kidding. It was tongue-in-cheek at first. A joke for myself. A wink at the name my dad had spat at me during the night he threw my bags out. But then I realized this could actually work. I built a basic site, clean, minimal, password protected. I uploaded all the documents. Scans, screenshots, timeline breakdowns. Even a section called Frequently Asked Gaslights, where I listed every excuse they'd ever used and the financial record that contradicted it. It wasn't for the public. It wasn't even for legal authorities, though I made sure everything was accurate just in case. It was for them. A mirror. One they couldn't look away from. I also prepped a document I called the Legacy Letter. A 12-page PDF addressed to my mother. Not accusatory. Not bitter. Just honest. I told her everything. What I knew. How it felt. The nights I sat in my car wondering if I was the crazy one. I told her how much it hurt to hear her say, maybe it's time you stopped relying on us, when I had spent my entire life carrying them, quietly, without complaint. The last line of the letter read, if you still believe on the freeloader, then you're welcome to show this letter to the lawyer. But if you read this and feel even the smallest flicker of guilt, then maybe the person you've been relying on this whole time wasn't me. It was the version of yourself that didn't have to face the truth. I attached the link to freeloaderfiles.com at the bottom. Password protected, of course. The password? Backbone. By the end of the month, everything was in place. Ben had recorded 2 phone calls with Uncle Dave, both of which included damning statements about getting Sean out of the picture and using Amanda's name if we have to. The estate attorney had officially locked the account, pending a full audit. I had my new business up and running, 3 steady clients, and a calendar full of meetings. And most importantly, I was ready, not just for the confrontation, but for the shift, because this wasn't just about exposing what they did. It was about resetting the roles. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the helper. I wasn't the mature one holding the family together. I was done, and I had one last step. A family group text. I never used it. Ever. Not even for holidays. But now I opened it up, scrolled to the top, and typed just 4 words. Read this. Carefully. Then I dropped the link and hit send. I didn't expect a response right away, but 20 minutes later, my phone started ringing. It wasn't Dad. It wasn't Mom. It was Amanda, calling me for the first time since she accused me of ruining her future. And I was about to pick up, but not to explain, not to apologize, to ask her one question. Who told you could lie about me and get away with it? Amanda's name lit up my phone like a flare in the dark. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Hello, I said, calm and flat. She didn't say hi, didn't ask how I was. Her voice hit the air like a slap. What is this? She snapped. That website. Those files. Are you trying to ruin us? I didn't answer right away. I let her stew for a beat. I wanted her to feel the silence, let it itch and crawl and press against her until it cracked. Then I said, you tried to steal $8 grand from an account you don't have legal access to. That was a mistake, Dad said. Oh, so you're admitting it now? She sputtered. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You made this expose, like you're some kind of whistleblower. We're your family, Sean. You were my family, I corrected. Until you decided I was just an ATM with Wi-Fi. I needed help. You needed accountability. She paused. Ben betrayed us, she finally muttered. Ben protected Grandpa's wishes. Just like I did. Just like you didn't. Click. She hung up. I sat back in my chair, closed my eyes, and exhaled. It wasn't revenge yet. Not entirely. But the cracks were starting to show. The next 48 hours were biblical. It started with Dad. He showed up at my apartment. Yes, showed up. No warning, no text, just banged on my door like a landlord with an eviction notice. I didn't open it. I watched through the peephole as he paced the hallway, red-faced and wild-eyed, waving a printed copy of the legacy letter like it was a warrant. I could hear him through the door. Is this your idea of respect? You humiliate us? You post our personal business on the internet. It's password protected, I said through the door. Only family has the link. So if you're embarrassed, maybe ask yourself why. He went quiet for a moment. Then, you ungrateful little. I opened the door a crack, enough to meet his eyes. Finish that sentence. I dare you. He froze. It wasn't fear. It was shock. He didn't recognize me. Not this version. The Sean who didn't flinch. The Sean who didn't try to patch things up for the sake of peace. You don't get to shame me anymore, I said. You don't get to call me a freeloader after misusing thousands in inheritance funds behind my back. You don't get to throw me out and then ask for handouts. I'm still your father, he muttered. And I'm still Grandpa's legal heir. You don't scare me anymore. He left without another word. The next fallout was faster. Aunt Delia. She emailed the estate attorney, demanding I be immediately removed as power of attorney for being emotionally unstable and vindictive. He forwarded me the email. I replied. Attached were all the call recordings Ben had captured, including one where she clearly said, Sean's too soft. He'll cave eventually. Just push hard enough. I also included a brief timeline of every unauthorized transaction she had requested or benefited from, including the Christmas trip to Aspen she claimed was fully covered by points. Spoiler, it wasn't. The estate attorney's reply to her was beautiful. Dear Delia, after reviewing the evidence provided, there is no legal or ethical basis to remove Sean from his duties. Your actions, however, may warrant further scrutiny. We recommend ceasing further contact unless through legal counsel. 2 hours later, she blocked me on everything. Then came the final act. Mom. No shouting. No emails. No dramatic knocks on my door. She called. Just once. And I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back later, she sounded defeated. Sean. I read the letter. I didn't know about some of it. Or maybe I did, and I didn't want to admit it. I was scared. Your father has always been difficult. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would keep things from exploding. But I see now, silence is part of the explosion. I'm sorry. Not for what he did. For what I didn't stop. I saved the voicemail. Listened to it twice. Then deleted it. Because forgiveness doesn't come from a single voicemail. It comes from change. A month later, the audit concluded. The inheritance account had been frozen completely, pending a redistribution process. Because here's the twist. Grandpa's will had a clause no one had ever noticed, or maybe they had, and ignored it. If misuse of funds was discovered, the estate could reallocate everything to the one descendant deemed most responsible. And guess who the audit found to be the only legally compliant manager? That's right, me. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw a party or send out smug messages. I just had the account restructured, transferred it into a secure trust. And this time, I didn't put anyone else's name on it. Not Mom's. Not Amanda's. Not even Ben's. Though I did wire him a thank you bonus big enough to wipe his student loans clean. He refused at first. I insisted. It's not a reward, I told him. It's justice with interest. The final family gathering came 6 months later. A forced Thanksgiving dinner hosted by my grandmother, the only relative not involved in the fiasco. She begged me to come. Said she just wanted one night where people could be in the same room without lawyers involved. I showed up, late, wearing a clean button-down, slacks, and a quiet smile. The room went still when I walked in. Amanda was there, eyes flicking down at her plate. Aunt Delia avoided eye contact. Uncle Dave muttered a hello like his mouth was full of sand. Dad didn't say a word. Mom, she just looked at me like she didn't know whether to hug me or cry. I sat down, ate my food, laughed at Grandma's stories, passed the gravy when asked. The whole time, I didn't acknowledge a single side conversation. I wasn't there to rebuild anything. I was there to mark the line. At one point, Amanda whispered, "Are you ever going to let this go?" I smiled politely. "You think I did this to hurt you?" I said. "I didn't. I did this to stop you." And with that, I stood up, thanked Grandma for dinner, and walked out into the cool autumn air. The stars were sharp that night, cold and clear. I looked up at them for a long time, not because I was searching for answers, because I finally had peace. And if anyone ever asks me why I blew up my entire family over a joint account, I'll say this, because sometimes peace has to be earned. And I stopped waiting for someone to give it to me. I'm Michael, 28, and I've never made a big deal about birthdays. Not since I was a kid, anyway. Maybe it's because I learned early on that no one else in my family really cared. They'd forget or just throw me a lazy happy birthday in passing. Sometimes not even that. But this year was different. Not because I expected anything, but because I had finally decided to stop pretending their behavior was normal. I had spent the last few years quietly holding everything together, paying bills, covering shortfalls, keeping a roof over everyone's heads. I didn't complain, didn't ask for anything in return. I just did it. Because they were family. Because that's what you're supposed to do, right? My mom had a rough few years after my dad left. I get that. And my younger sister, Caitlin, 23 and still somehow acting like she's owed the world, had a history of trying things out and quitting a month later. She still lived with Mom in the townhouse I paid for. Neither of them worked much. Mom did part-time remote stuff now and then, and Caitlin took the occasional commission for graphic design. But the bills? The groceries? Even the streaming services? All me. Quietly. Every month. I had a shared account with them that I transferred money into so they wouldn't have to ask. It made things easier for them. It made things harder for me, sure, but I kept doing it. Until last week. My birthday was on a Thursday. I wasn't expecting balloons or anything, but it would have been nice to get a text, a call, even just a dumb GIF in the family group chat. Instead, I woke up to silence. I scrolled through notifications while sipping my coffee and saw the group chat was still active, but not for me. Caitlin had posted a photo of herself in some cafe downtown with the caption, "Self-care day with my fave person, me." A couple friends commented. I ignored it. Around noon, I checked again. Still nothing. Not a single happy birthday. I had work calls all day and tried to shake it off. Then around 4 p.m., Caitlin dropped this in the chat. "Stop acting like anyone cares it's your birthday." And my mom gave it a thumbs up. I stared at it for a solid minute, thinking maybe they were joking. But there was no setup. No inside joke. Just that. No, just kidding. No follow-up. Just radio silence. I didn't reply. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel shocked. Just numb. And weirdly calm. My fingers tapped idly against the ceramic mug in my hand, and I realized something. I had made it way too easy for them. They didn't just take me for granted. They genuinely believed they were entitled to everything I gave them. And they clearly didn't respect me. Not as family, not even as a person. I'd been treated like a utility. Like an ATM with no opinions, no boundaries, and definitely no birthday. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and drove straight to the bank. It was quiet inside. The branch manager, Carla, recognized me. I'd helped her son get an internship the year before. She always remembered that. I explained what I wanted. Freeze the card, remove my name from the shared account, and flag all future transactions for approval. She nodded, didn't ask too many questions. Just walked me through it, one calm step at a time. I left the bank an hour later with a folder of papers and a strange sense of peace in my chest. Not relief, exactly. Just clarity. Like I'd finally stopped trying to win a game I never agreed to play. Back home, I didn't text them, didn't warn them, didn't hint at anything. I ordered myself sushi, opened a movie I'd been meaning to watch, and sat back on my couch in silence. At 11:42 p.m., Caitlin sent another message in the group chat. LMAO, why is the card declining? Mom replied, mine too. Is the app down? Then Caitlin again. I just tried at Kroger, and it's not working. Like at all. Still, I said nothing. I closed the app and went to bed. The next morning started like any other, except it didn't. My phone had 10 missed calls from my mom. Caitlin had left 5 voicemails. The texts were piling in like spam. Mike, what is going on? Did you change something? Call me back. Are we locked out of the account? Why is the landlord here? I blinked and scrolled slowly. Apparently, the landlord had shown up at their door that morning to ask about the rent, because the auto-pay bounced. I'd canceled that too. Same with the electric bill, water, and internet. I hadn't told them yet, but I was in the process of transferring the lease to a new name. Mine. I didn't need them living in my place anymore. I'd even spoken to an attorney about how to handle evicting a family member legally if they refused to leave. It wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, about peace, about finally saying enough. But I didn't write back yet. Not that day. Instead, I went to work, answered emails, made small talk with coworkers who did remember my birthday, bless their souls, and let the calls from Caitlin and my mom go to voicemail. By evening, they were texting things like, "Are you okay?" and "Please just let us know what's going on." But I wasn't in a hurry to explain, because for once, they were the ones left in the dark. For once, they were scrambling. That weekend, I got a text from my cousin Sarah, the only one in the family who ever really made an effort with me. She said Caitlin had posted something passive-aggressive on Instagram. Crazy how people switch up when you depend on them. And Mom had commented with a sad face emoji. Sarah asked if everything was okay. I told her I was fine, just finally drawing a line. I didn't expect her to respond with, "Good. Honestly, they've been awful to you for years. You don't deserve that." And maybe it shouldn't have meant so much, but it did. Still, that wasn't the end of it. Monday morning came with a knock on my apartment door. It wasn't the delivery I was expecting. It was Caitlin, hood up, eyes puffy, arms crossed. "Can we talk?" she asked. And for a second, I almost invited her in. But then I remembered the text. The thumbs up. The groceries I'd paid for. The bills I'd covered. The years of being treated like the invisible man, until they needed something. So I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She shifted awkwardly. "You froze everything." I nodded. "Yeah. Why?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same entitlement, the same arrogance, only now cracked at the edges. She huffed. "Look, if this is about that dumb text." And that's where I cut her off. "Don't," I said quietly but firmly. "Don't call it dumb. Don't pretend it was a joke. You meant it." Caitlin rolled her eyes, but there was a flicker of uncertainty behind it. "Come on, Mike. It was just a thing. A comment. I say stuff like that all the time." "And that's the problem," I replied. "You say stuff like that all the time. You act like nothing matters, like no one else feels anything. You and Mom both. You've treated me like I'm a ghost in this family unless you need something. Money, groceries, rent, whatever. But the second I want something, even just basic decency, you make me feel like a burden." She scoffed. "You're not a burden." "No," I asked, my voice rising. "Then what am I?" Because I sure wasn't a brother. Not when you and Mom joked about me in the group chat. Not when you used the card to buy your little self-care days, or when Mom charged her prescriptions to my account without even asking. Not when I paid your credit card debt last year, just so you wouldn't tank your score. Her face twisted. "I didn't ask you to do that." I laughed bitterly. "That's your go-to, huh?" I didn't ask. Like silence is a defense. Like ignoring my birthday was okay because you didn't ask me to care about yours either. It doesn't work like that. She crossed her arms tighter and stared at the ground. "Okay, so what now? You just cut us off." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. "I'm not cutting you off," I said. "I'm giving you back the life you wanted so badly without me in it. You didn't want a brother. You wanted a sponsor." Her eyes widened, but I didn't stop. I tried for years to be enough. To be useful, to be helpful, to be wanted. But all I ever got back was sarcasm, silence, and an endless list of obligations. I don't want an apology. I don't want a hug. I want space. So you're evicting us, she snapped. You're seriously just throwing us out? No. The lease was always in my name. I'm just not renewing it with you as a guest. You've got 30 days. I'll even pay for the moving truck if you don't make a scene. She blinked, stunned. You're serious. Dead serious. There was a long pause. Then she tried one more angle. Mom's not well. You know that. She's stressed. She says things she doesn't mean. I exhaled sharply. You want to talk about stress? Try being the guy who has to listen to his own mother call him emotionally unavailable because he stopped giving out blank checks. I'm not, Mom, Caitlin muttered. No, I agreed. You're not. But you're not far off. She winced like I'd slapped her. I'm sorry, she said at last, and to her credit, I think she meant it. I really am. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think you cared. That stung more than anything else. Of course I cared. That's why I stuck around this long. I turned the knob behind me. I'm not asking you to change, I added. I'm just not going to stick around waiting for it anymore. She stood frozen, lips slightly parted, no words coming. I didn't expect her to beg or cry. Caitlin wasn't built that way. She was good at shrugging things off and pretending the world owed her nothing, until it actually gave her nothing. Then she panicked. As I stepped back inside, I paused. By the way, I said without turning around, I canceled the family phone plan too. Might want to look into that. Then I closed the door. For the next hour, I just stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, breathing. My hands trembled a bit, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I was free. Finally, the silence of the apartment felt different now, less empty, more earned. But the fallout wasn't over yet. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but the transcript popped up on my screen. Michael, it's Mom. I don't know what's going on, but this is cruel. I've been there for you. Always. You don't do this to family. You don't just walk away. Please call me. We can talk about this. I didn't return the call. A few hours later, I got another message. This time, an email. It was from my mom's lawyer. I didn't open the email right away. I stared at the subject line, urgent, property ownership dispute, action requested, and let it sit in my inbox for a few hours. Maybe I was giving myself time to think. Maybe I was waiting to feel something. Anger, anxiety, regret. But none of those came. Just a cold, quiet resolve that told me I was done playing the role they'd written for me. Eventually, I opened the message. The body of the email was formal, full of polite legalese that barely masked the desperation behind it. The lawyer, a man named Stanley Reeves, said my mother was disputing the validity of the recent changes made to the property title and that she believed the townhouse should be considered a family asset rather than an individual-owned property. He asked for a meeting, a friendly resolution. I almost laughed. Friendly. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I dug out the folder Carla at the bank had helped me organize, account statements, the original property deed, the lease terms, the transfer of ownership to my LLC. Everything was signed, notarized, and time-stamped. I even had the email chain from 2 years ago when Mom had signed the lease paperwork herself, agreeing to be a tenant. At the time, she'd waved it off, joking, just paperwork stuff for your taxes, right? I'd nodded. I hadn't expected I'd ever have to use it. Now I was glad I did. Still, I didn't want this to get ugly. Despite everything, part of me still held on to some thread of humanity, a quiet voice whispering, don't burn it down. Just walk away. But I was starting to see that walking away, for them, looked like betrayal. To them, love only counted when it cost me something. 2 days later, I sent a brief email back to the lawyer. Dear Mr. Reeves, thank you for reaching out. The property in question is legally owned by LLC name, with full documentation available upon request. Please note, the lease agreement signed on date is still in effect. As per Clause 9A, the property owner reserves the right not to renew the lease upon expiration. No breach of contract has occurred. I respectfully decline a meeting at this time. Sincerely, Michael Carter. Within 20 minutes, I got a reply saying they'd review the documents and advise the client accordingly. Translation: they didn't expect me to push back. Later that night, I saw another post from Caitlin, this time on her Instagram story. It was a black screen with white text. Crazy how family can ice you out like a stranger over one comment. We never stood a chance. I didn't reply. The next morning, my doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. My mother. She looked different than I remembered. Older. Smaller. Wearing a raincoat, even though the sky was clear. When I opened the door, she didn't say anything for a moment. Just looked me up and down like she was searching for something in my face, something familiar, maybe something soft. "I raised you better than this," she finally said. "Did you?" I asked. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to meet her like that. Her voice shifted, less accusatory, more wounded. "Michael, we were a family. We are a family. Families say things they don't mean. Families fight, but they don't just cut each other off over birthday texts." I leaned against the doorframe. "This isn't about one text, Mom. It's about every time I was only good enough when I was useful. It's about years of you pretending like I didn't matter unless I was paying for something. Do you even know where I work? What I do? What I'm passionate about?" She didn't answer. I continued. "Caitlin gets a new phone. I cover it. You need a dentist appointment? I book it and pay the bill. Emergency car repairs? I handle it. Did you ever once say thank you? Did either of you ask how I was doing?" Her face tightened. "You never asked us for help, Michael. You made it seem like you had it all figured out." "No," I said. "I made it look easy because you made it impossible to ask. Every time I was honest, you made me feel guilty. Or selfish. Or like I was trying to start a fight. I've been quiet for years, hoping things would get better. But nothing changed. And I finally realized they won't." She looked away. "I know things were hard after Dad left," I added. "But that doesn't justify turning me into your safety net. You didn't raise me to be better. You raised me to be useful. There's a difference." She was quiet for a long time, then finally said, "So that's it. You're done with us." I hesitated. "No," I said. "I'm done letting you treat me like I owe you for existing. You can still be in my life if you respect my boundaries. If you stop using me. If you start treating me like a person and not a paycheck." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "And if you want to stay in that townhouse, sign a new lease. Pay rent. No games. No guilt trips. Just responsibility. Like the rest of us." Her expression flickered. Shock, anger, maybe even shame. But she didn't yell. Didn't cry. Just nodded once, sharply, like she was swallowing something bitter. Then she turned and walked down the hallway. I didn't call after her. Later that night, Caitlin texted me. "So what now? You just want us to pretend everything's fine and pay like strangers?" I stared at the message, thinking about how to respond. But before I could type anything, my phone buzzed again, another notification. This one wasn't from Caitlin or Mom. It was from the property manager of the townhouse. A formal alert that the thermostat had been set to 92 degrees. Another notification followed. The kitchen faucet was left running. And then a third. Someone had disabled the security camera on the back door. I stood up, heart racing, jaw tightening. They weren't going to go quietly. And I had no idea just how far they were willing to go. I didn't sleep that night. The notifications from the property manager app kept rolling in. Lights flicking on and off at odd hours. Someone setting off the smoke alarm by accident. The garage door left wide open for hours. They were trying to rattle me. Or maybe just send a message. It was petty, passive-aggressive sabotage. But I'd expected this. Caitlin and my mom didn't like being told no. Especially not by me. Especially not when it meant consequences. At 2:14 a.m., I got a call from the security company. One of the water sensors in the basement had been triggered. I asked them to shut off the water line remotely and dispatch someone to check it out. The tech showed up an hour later and confirmed it. The utility sink had been left running and plugged, causing it to overflow. Intentionally. I sat there, staring at the ceiling in my apartment, watching the fan spin in slow, useless circles. This wasn't just retaliation, it was a tantrum. A childish, desperate attempt to force my hand. To make me feel guilty. To pull me back into their orbit. Because if they couldn't control me with obligation, they'd try chaos. By morning, I had a plan. I drove straight to the townhouse, unannounced. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the way on foot. The neighborhood was quiet. The house looked the same from the outside, except for a pile of garbage bags stacked up by the garage door, like they'd made a point of dumping everything outside instead of using the bins. Typical. I unlocked the front door with my copy and stepped inside. The heat hit me immediately. They'd left the thermostat cranked to 92 degrees, just like the alert said. The air felt like soup. I walked through the house in silence. The fridge was open. Empty. The shelves were smeared with something sticky. A single carton of expired milk sat on the top rack like a threat. In the living room, the TV was on full volume, blaring a static screen. No one home. I went upstairs. Caitlin's room was empty, stripped of most personal items except for a few old clothes tossed on the floor. Mom's room was more or less the same. Closet half emptied, drawers pulled out, a bedside lamp knocked over. On the bathroom mirror, someone had written in red lipstick, "Hope it was worth it." I stood there, staring at that sentence, and felt nothing. No anger, no regret, just a strange, calm detachment, like reading a note left behind by a stranger in a story I wasn't part of anymore. I spent the next hour documenting everything. I took photos of the water damage in the basement, the trash, the fridge, the mirror, the thermostat settings, the deactivated security cam mount. I cataloged it all. I sent it to my lawyer with a short note. Damage appears deliberate. Proceed with formal eviction and reimbursement claim. By noon, they were officially served. The papers went to Mom's temporary address, one I had from a previous medical emergency she'd asked me to help with, and to Caitlin's P.O. box she used for freelance work. The documents gave them 7 days to respond. If they didn't, it would move straight to court. If they did, well, they'd have a very hard time explaining all the documentation and tampering to a judge. That night, I got a text from Caitlin. "Wow, you really want to humiliate us in court? This is so petty." I didn't respond. A few hours later, Mom sent one too. "You didn't have to go this far. You wanted this. You wanted to punish us. Well, I hope you're happy." And you know what? I was. But not for the reasons they thought. I wasn't happy they were struggling. I wasn't gloating over the damage. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. The week passed quickly. I handed the matter off to my lawyer and stayed out of it. He updated me every couple of days. Caitlin tried to file a countersuit, but it was tossed out. Mom attempted to claim emotional distress, but the judge asked for evidence, and she had none. The case settled fast, quieter than I expected, likely because they realized I wasn't bluffing, and they didn't want me dragging every screenshot, voicemail, and payment record into open court. By the end of the month, they were gone. The townhouse was officially back in my name. I hired a cleaning crew, replaced the locks, and had the place professionally repaired. The water damage wasn't as bad as I feared, but the cleanup bill was still hefty, just under $5,000. Still, I considered it a bargain for peace. I never heard another word from either of them. No apologies. No messages. No half-hearted attempts to reconnect. Just silence. And I was fine with that. It's been 6 months now. The house is rented to a young couple who actually say thank you when I fix something. They painted the place themselves, added plants on the balcony, and pay their rent on time. I check in with them every few weeks, and every time I walk through that front door, it feels like a ghost has been exorcised. Caitlin moved in with some friends, according to a mutual acquaintance. Mom's living with a distant cousin in another state. Apparently, they're both telling people that I lost it and kicked them out over a misunderstanding. That I was never really stable. Fine, let them say what they want. I'm not trying to rewrite their version of the story. I'm just done living in it. My birthday came and went last month. Quiet, simple, peaceful. I took the day off work, treated myself to a nice lunch, walked along the lake, turned off my phone. No expectations, no guilt, just space. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to remember me, because I remembered me, and that was more than enough. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. My name is Jordan, I'm 33, and until recently, I thought I understood the concept of family. I thought family meant unconditional support, mutual respect, and love that wasn't measured in trophies, degrees, or applause. But apparently, in my family, it meant something else entirely, something transactional, cold, and cruelly calculative. I didn't come from a broken home in the traditional sense. My parents were married for over 3 decades, lived in a neatly kept suburban house with rose bushes along the front walk and seasonal wreaths on the door. To the outside world, we looked like the ideal middle-class family. But underneath that picturesque surface was a silent hierarchy. At the top, my sister, Cassidy. Cassidy was the golden child from day one. Blonde, charismatic, and photogenic, every teacher's favorite, every coach's pick, every neighbor's pride. She was the type of person who could smile through a lie and still have people thanking her for it. My parents didn't just favor her, they practically worshipped her. If she got a B, the teacher was incompetent. If she got in trouble, someone else started it. When I got straight A's and held down 2 part-time jobs in high school, I was told to be more like your sister. She knows how to enjoy life. I was the afterthought, the reliable one, the one who didn't need attention. At least, that's what they always said. Growing up, I used to think that being responsible would eventually pay off. That if I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed generous, they'd see me. Really see me. But that recognition never came. Cassidy flunked out of her first year of college and still got a brand new car. I graduated with honors, and they gave me a used blender and a lecture on budgeting. Cassidy had 3 failed startups before 25, all funded, of course, by mom and dad. I had to take out loans and live in a crumbling studio apartment just to get my MBA. And yet, I still tried to be close to them. I visited on holidays. I helped with repairs around the house. I drove them to appointments when their car was in the shop. I never brought up how unfair it felt, how invisible I often was. I thought that maybe, just maybe, being consistent would matter more in the long run than being flashy. It didn't. 3 years ago, when my father had a minor stroke, I was the one who rearranged my work schedule to stay with him during recovery. Cassidy dropped by once with flowers and left before lunch. I moved in temporarily, cooking meals, managing his medications, driving him to therapy. My mom thanked me once, in passing, then asked if I could start paying the utility bills just for now. That, just for now, turned into 3 years of me quietly covering the mortgage, water, electric, internet, property tax, and even their medical copays when needed. Every month, without fail, the payments went out from my account. I figured they were getting older. They'd done their best. This was just part of being a good son. But then came the birthday dinner. It was Cassidy's idea. She was turning 35 and wanted something elegant but intimate. So we booked a nice little place downtown. I offered to cover the whole thing. Dinner, drinks, cake, everything, and no one objected. We were seated around a long table near the back of the restaurant, 20 guests in total. Friends, cousins, co-workers, even her yoga instructor. And me, quietly footing the bill while sipping water, listening to stories I wasn't a part of. Toward the end of the night, after the cake was served, Cassidy clinked her glass with a spoon and stood up to give a speech. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," she began, smiling like she was running for office. "It means so much to celebrate with the people who've always believed in me." She went on to thank her friends for their support, her boss for mentorship, even her ex-boyfriend for teaching her resilience. Then she looked right at our parents. "And of course, thank you, Mom and Dad, for raising the smart one, the one with dreams and drive." People chuckled, even applauded. Then she turned to me. "And thank you, Jordan, for always being there. You're like, I don't know, the family's safety net? The one who makes sure the lights stay on. Honestly, we don't give you enough credit. You're the ultimate backup plan." Backup plan. The room laughed again, softly, as if she'd made a cute joke. I smiled, not out of amusement, but because I suddenly understood. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't just a poorly worded compliment. It was the truth. That was how they saw me. Not the smart one. Not the talented one. Not the child they bragged about or leaned on for pride. I was the one who paid the bills. The one who kept the lights on so they could keep shining. The ride home was silent. I dropped them all off, said goodnight, and didn't sleep a second. I sat in the kitchen of my condo, the one I bought with no help, no gifts, no safety net, and stared at my phone. That phrase echoed in my head, backup plan. It wasn't just offensive. It was clarifying. It stripped away any illusion I had left about where I stood. And for the first time in my adult life, I stopped trying to justify their behavior. The next morning, I went through the documents. See, my parents' house, the one they'd been living in for decades, was no longer in their name. Back when Dad's medical bills had piled up, the house was refinanced and, through some paperwork wizardry and a lawyer friend of mine, transferred into mine as collateral against my support. At the time, they needed help. I had the resources. They didn't question it. They just signed the dotted lines. So legally, it was mine. Every inch of that 2-story, rose-covered house was mine. I made a few calls. Quietly. Carefully. No shouting, no dramatic ultimatums. I didn't need to yell. I just needed to act. I gave notice to the rental agency that managed a few of my properties, informed them that one of my houses would soon be vacated. I contacted a real estate agent. I filed the paperwork, all without a word to my family. The tension really began to build 2 weeks later when my parents casually mentioned that the internet had gone out, again, and asked if I could call the provider. I told them to handle it themselves, just this once. Cassidy texted me with a WTF is going on when she heard they had to pay a gas bill on their own. I told her I was taking a step back from being the backup plan. She didn't respond. Then came the letter from the realtor. Not to them, to me. Confirming the listing date, the schedule for photos, the plan for showings. It all felt surreal. Cold, maybe, but also oddly peaceful. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I was doing it because I finally saw things clearly. I was not part of that pedestal. I was the floor they stood on, and it was time to move. The breaking point came the day the for sale sign was hammered into the front yard. I wasn't even there. I got a call from my dad. The voicemail was shaky and confused. "Jordan, what's this sign doing in front of the house? Is this some kind of mistake? Call me back." I didn't. Later that evening, Cassidy called. Not texted, called. Her voice was cold and brittle, like glass on the verge of shattering. "You're selling the house?" she demanded. Without telling anyone. "I'm selling my house," I said calmly. "And there's no one I needed to tell. But Mom and Dad live there. What are they supposed to do?" Maybe they should have thought about that before turning their son into a credit card with a heartbeat. There was silence. Then the sound of her exhaling sharply through her nose, like she couldn't believe I'd dared to speak that way. "You're being petty." "No," I said. "I'm being done." And that was when things really started unraveling. But I'll tell you what happened next in a moment, because the movers hadn't even arrived yet. It started with Cassidy showing up unannounced at my condo 2 days later. She didn't knock. She pounded. I opened the door to find her already mid-rant, eyes blazing, arms crossed like she'd rehearsed the whole speech in the car. "You're not actually going through with this," she snapped, storming in before I even had the chance to answer. "Tell me this is some passive-aggressive stunt you're pulling to get attention." I shut the door behind her calmly. "It's not a stunt. The house goes on the market next week. It's already in the system." "But why would you do this?" she demanded, throwing her hands up. "Do you have any idea what this will do to Mom and Dad? They'll be homeless, Jordan. They don't have anywhere else to go." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. "You mean besides the lake house Mom keeps bringing up? Or that little cabin in Vermont Dad's always talking about fixing up? Or your spare bedroom?" Cassidy blinked. "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point," I said. "I've covered every bill in that house for years. I let them transfer the deed to me under the condition that I'd protect them. I did. I kept my promise. But they didn't keep theirs." "What promise?" she scoffed. "They're our parents. You're acting like this is some legal transaction." "That's exactly what it is now," I said flatly. "You made it that way." "They did. When I stopped being their son and became their emergency fund." Cassidy stared at me, and for the first time in years, she didn't have a comeback ready. She didn't even look angry. She looked caught, exposed, like something had finally clicked, and she didn't like the picture it painted. "You're really doing this," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The week that followed felt like a slow unraveling. My mother called once. Just once. She left a message that was equal parts confused and cold. "Jordan, we got your notice. I don't know what's going on with you, but this isn't how family behaves. Call me." She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't ask why. She didn't acknowledge anything that had led to this moment. Just that classic maternal undertone of guilt and confusion, like I was the problem for not playing my assigned role. I didn't call back. When the movers arrived, scheduled precisely, professionally, as everything I do tends to be, I stayed out of sight. I wasn't there to gloat. I just wanted closure. I parked a block away and watched from my car, engine off, windows down. They were already outside by the time the truck pulled up. Cassidy was pacing on the lawn, phone pressed to her ear, furious. My mother stood on the porch, arms crossed, looking small. My dad sat on the front step, hunched forward, not saying anything. He looked old, older than I remembered him being. Maybe it was the weight of everything catching up at once. Maybe it was the weight I had been quietly carrying for them for years, now dropped back in their laps. The movers worked fast. Efficient. I'd paid extra for that. Sofa, chairs, boxes, drawers. All of it came out of the house like a flood reversed, life being scooped out and loaded into an unmarked white truck. And then it happened. Cassidy saw the deed papers in one of the boxes. I recognized the black folder from where I was sitting. She ripped it open, stared at the bold header, property title, owner, Jordan M. Reyes. She screamed. Not like a horror movie scream. It was raw, unfiltered outrage. A sound that said, This wasn't supposed to happen. That folder must have made it real in her mind. Not just some brotherly tantrum or dramatic bluff. This was permanent. She turned and shouted something at my parents. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the panic rising. My mother waved her arms. My father stood slowly. Cassidy pointed at the movers, then at the truck, then at the sign on the lawn. They were losing it. All of them. And all I could feel was silence inside myself. Not satisfaction. Not joy. Just release. Years of being told I was the stable one. The quiet one. The safe bet. Years of being expected to step in without question, to shoulder the burdens no one else wanted to deal with. Years of hearing, Cassidy's going through a lot right now, as an excuse for why she got more love, more time, more grace, while I got obligations and expectations wrapped in guilt trips. I watched as a dresser was rolled down the driveway, and Cassidy stomped her foot, yelling at the mover like it was his fault her illusion of control was crumbling. It was at that moment, that exact moment, when I realized she still didn't get it. None of them did. They weren't upset about losing the house. They were upset about losing the version of me who made their lives easier. The version who said yes to everything. The version who covered for their mistakes, absorbed their neglect, and never asked for anything in return. That version was gone. I stayed until the last box was loaded. Until the sign was pulled from the yard. Until Cassidy sat down on the front step next to our dad, both of them looking up at the house with this shell-shocked stillness. Then I started the car. I didn't wave. I didn't honk. I didn't roll down the window. I just drove away. But the real aftermath, the texts, the emails, the letter that arrived a few days later, that is a whole other chapter. And trust me, that's when things got ugly. The first message came that night, a long, rambling text from my mom. Not an apology. Not even an attempt to understand. Just pure emotional blackmail, the kind of language she'd perfected over the years and used like a scalpel. I don't know what kind of phase you're going through, Jordan, but this is beyond cruel. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof, and Cassidy hasn't stopped crying. We are your family. Families don't do this to each other. You need to fix this before it's too late. No acknowledgement of the years I spent keeping their lives afloat. No mention of the bills I paid, the time I sacrificed, the birthday dinner that started it all. Just outrage that I'd finally withdrawn my quiet, constant loyalty. I didn't respond. The second message came from Cassidy the next morning. Shorter, but more venomous. You're a selfish little boy who finally snapped because you couldn't handle not being the favorite. Congrats. You win. You destroyed the only stable thing in their lives. I stared at that one for a long time. The only stable thing. Not beloved son. Not caring brother. Not family. Just stability. A pillar. A paycheck. That was how they saw me. 2 days later, I got a letter. An actual letter, the kind with a waxy envelope and my name written in careful cursive. It was from my dad. It was quiet, reflective, and full of sentences that trailed off. You could tell he'd written it slowly, probably over hours, maybe while sitting at the kitchen table they no longer had. I don't know where things went wrong between us, but I want you to know I never meant for you to feel like you were less than your sister. Cassidy just needed more support, more attention. You were always solid. We leaned on you because we knew we could. Maybe that wasn't fair. Maybe we didn't say thank you enough. There was a pause in the middle of the page, a long gap, like he'd walked away and come back later. Your mom is scared. She's lashing out. This house, it was our whole life. I never thought we'd lose it like this. I know we signed those papers. I just didn't think you'd ever act on them. I guess we took that for granted too. He didn't ask me to stop the sale. He didn't ask me to come home. He just ended it with, whatever happens next. I hope you're okay. That one nearly broke me. Not because it was sentimental, but because it was the closest anyone in my family had ever come to admitting they were wrong. And even then, it still danced around the truth. They hadn't just taken me for granted, they'd hollowed me out. Expected me to give and give and give, without once asking how much it cost. But I kept moving forward. The house officially listed on the market the following week. My agent called me with updates, asking if I wanted to consider renting it instead of selling, maybe to keep the peace. I told her no. I needed this clean break. Meanwhile, I started getting strange emails. From relatives. A cousin I hadn't heard from in years messaged me on Facebook saying, "Hey, heard some stuff about the house. You okay?" A family friend reached out through LinkedIn of all places, saying, "Your mom is pretty torn up. Maybe talk to her." Apparently, the story they'd told everyone was that I'd had some kind of breakdown, that I was acting out, that I was cutting ties without warning, as if none of them had any clue what led to this. I didn't defend myself. I didn't post cryptic messages or send out a mass explanation. Let them talk. Let them whisper. I was done explaining myself to people who only listened when I was silent. But the real firestorm came 1 week later, when the buyers showed up for a scheduled walkthrough, and Cassidy refused to let them in. I found out through my real estate agent. She sounded exasperated and honestly, a little embarrassed. "Jordan, I'm so sorry, but the buyers showed up today for the 2 p.m. showing, and there was a situation. A woman claiming to be a relative was standing in the driveway screaming that the house wasn't for sale. She blocked their car. She even threw one of the potted plants." I closed my eyes and sighed. Let me guess. Blonde, late 30s, expensive sunglasses, thinks she's invincible. "Exactly," she said. Cassidy had stationed herself on the front lawn like some sort of protester. She'd parked her SUV sideways at the end of the driveway and refused to move when the buyers showed up. According to a neighbor, she'd been pacing the porch all morning, muttering into her phone, threatening to call a lawyer, though what lawyer, she didn't say. When the realtor politely asked her to leave, Cassidy claimed squatters' rights. She said she'd lived there long enough and had tenancy protection, which was laughable, considering she hadn't actually lived in the house for years. She only ever came by when she needed something, a meal, a favor, a place to crash for the weekend. After the buyers left, understandably spooked, she sent me a video. Not a message, a full video. It was her walking through the house, ranting into the camera. "Look at this. This was our family home, our history, and now my brother is tearing it apart like it's a business transaction. All because he couldn't stand being in someone else's shadow. This is what entitlement looks like, folks. This is what selfishness does." She posted it online. Tagged me. It got 2 likes. I didn't reply. I didn't call her. I just sent the video to my lawyer. The next day, a formal eviction notice was delivered to my parents. Cassidy was no longer staying there, but the stunt had consequences. My lawyer was firm. If she disrupted another showing, we'd press charges. If she set foot on the property again, it would be trespassing. Things went quiet after that. Until one night, around 11:30 p.m., I got a voicemail from my mom. She was crying. "We didn't know, Jordan. We didn't realize you felt this way. I thought we were just being parents. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to make you feel invisible." She sobbed, sniffled, then added something that stuck in my throat. "I just want my family back." I listened to that message over and over again, sitting in the dark of my apartment. And I'll admit, for the first time since this whole thing began, I wavered. But then, the next morning, Cassidy showed up at my office. And what she said changed everything. She walked into the lobby like she owned the place. High heels clicking, sunglasses still on despite being indoors. I saw her through the glass wall of the conference room where I was finishing up a meeting with a client. At first, I thought it had to be a coincidence. No way she'd show up here. She hated this part of town. Said it smelled like ambition and burnt coffee. But there she was, Cassidy, dressed like she was headed to brunch, standing at the front desk with a manicured hand raised, tapping the counter with the kind of impatience that said she had never been told to wait in her life. My assistant buzzed me. Jordan, there's a woman here. She says she's your sister." Of course she did. I excused myself from the meeting, smoothed my shirt, and walked out, already bracing myself. Cassidy turned at the sound of the door opening, removed her sunglasses with the dramatic flourish of someone used to being on stage, and smiled, tight-lipped and hollow. "There you are," she said. "We need to talk." I didn't invite her to sit. I just nodded toward the hallway. "Conference room. 5 minutes." She didn't argue. We sat across from each other at the long table where I'd closed deals, pitched strategies, and built a life no one in my family had ever really asked about. Cassidy leaned forward, elbows on the glass, and started without preamble. "You made your point. Loud and clear. You embarrassed us. You threw our lives into chaos. And congratulations. Everyone's talking about you now. I hope that feels good." I said nothing. I wanted to see where she'd take it. She leaned back, folding her arms. "But this has gone on long enough. You've made Mom sick with worry. Dad barely speaks. And me? I'm tired of cleaning up your mess. So let's end this, okay? Let's sell the house, split the money, and move on." That's when I laughed. Not loudly. Just a short breath. the kind that slips out before you can stop it. She froze. What's funny? You think this is about money? I asked. It's always about money with you, she snapped. You act like you're above it, but deep down, that's all you care about, control. You want to wave your bank account around like it makes you better than the rest of us. I shook my head. No, Cassidy. I wanted respect. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted to stop being treated like an ATM with a pulse. She scoffed. You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm finally seeing them clearly. Cassidy pushed back from the table. So what? You're just done with us? Done with your family because we didn't shower you with praise every time you paid a bill. I looked her in the eyes. I'm done pretending that love means sacrifice without reciprocity. I'm done believing that being useful is the same as being valued. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. You call me the backup plan, Cassidy. In public. In front of our parents. Our friends. You said it like it was a compliment. Like I should be proud. She hesitated. For a flicker of a moment, something like guilt passed over her face. I didn't mean it like that. But that's exactly how you all saw me, I said. The one who fixes everything. The one who pays, who listens, who stays quiet. And the second I stop playing that role, suddenly I'm selfish. Suddenly I'm the bad guy. Her voice dropped. You hurt them, Jordan. They hurt me first. I replied, more firmly than I expected. Silence stretched between us. She looked away. You're really going through with the sale? I signed the final papers this morning, I said. It closes Friday. Cassidy stood. You think this makes you better than us, but it just makes you alone. I stood too. No, it just makes me free. She left without another word. The sale closed 3 days later. The house was bought by a retired couple from out of state who wanted to be closer to their grandchildren. They loved the roses. Said they reminded them of their first home together. I didn't visit the house again. I didn't need to. 2 weeks after the sale, my parents moved into a small rental property a few towns over. Cassidy didn't help them pack. I heard from a cousin that she'd taken a trip to Cancun to reset after all the drama. My mother sent me one more letter. This time shorter, quieter. We're in the new place. It's small, but comfortable. Your father misses his garden. I miss you. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I hope someday you can. I didn't reply, not because I hated them. I didn't, but because I needed distance. I needed time to unlearn years of being the fixer, the provider, the forgotten son who smiled through the neglect because it was easier than confronting it. In that silence, something unexpected happened. I started living. I booked a solo trip to Kyoto, something I'd wanted to do since college but never could because I was always needed back home. I picked up my old guitar again. I took long walks without my phone. I learned how to cook something more complicated than microwave meals. I stopped checking my family group chat, which had turned into a ghost town anyway. And slowly, the weight I'd carried, the invisible debt, the unspoken expectation began to lift. One evening, months later, I ran into an old neighbor from the block where I grew up. She looked surprised to see me, then smiled warmly. You're Jordan, right? From the White House with the roses. I nodded. I always thought you were the one holding that whole family together, she said. Sorry if that's forward. But it seemed like they didn't always see how much you did. I smiled. They saw just enough to lean on me, not enough to thank me. She laughed gently. Well, I hope you're doing better now. You always deserved more. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I didn't even need reconciliation. I just needed my own life. And I finally had it. That house wasn't just where I grew up. It was a symbol of silence, of obligation, of playing a role that slowly erased me. Letting it go wasn't a loss. It was liberation. Cassidy stopped trying to contact me. My parents sent one card on my birthday the following year. No money inside. No message beyond thinking of you. It was fine. Sometimes, people say blood is thicker than water. But I've learned that's not always true. Sometimes, the people who share your blood are the ones who drown you. And sometimes, walking away isn't giving up. It's the first breath after finally coming up for air. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I was my own beginning. My name's Noah. I'm 28, live in Seattle, and until recently, I thought I had finally carved out a life far away from the drama I grew up with. I work in software design, have a quiet apartment with a great view of the water, and I've been lucky enough to be financially comfortable enough that for the past 4 years, I've been quietly paying for both of my younger siblings' college tuition. My brother Luke is 21 and studying engineering. My sister Ava is 19, a sophomore in nursing. My parents couldn't afford it, at least, that's what they always said. But I made a deal with myself. I'd help them because I knew what it was like to struggle, and I believed they'd do the same for me if the roles were reversed. That belief was my first mistake. I hadn't even told my siblings I was covering their tuition. They just thought it was coming from family savings, which is a joke considering my mom once pawned my Xbox for rent money and forgot to tell me. But I didn't care about the recognition. I did it because I wanted them to succeed. I wanted them to have what I didn't. Now, I should say this. My relationship with my mom has always been complicated. She's the kind of person who believes in tough love, which really means she's cold, critical, and only affectionate when it serves her. My dad mostly stays quiet, a shadow in every room, nodding along to whatever she says like he's trying to avoid setting her off. Growing up, I learned fast that love in our house had conditions, grades, obedience, praise, but only if it was directed toward Ava or Luke. With me, it was different. I was the test child, the one they had too young and too broke, the one they made all their mistakes on. Still, I kept trying. Last month, I flew home for Luke's birthday. I brought a gift, a new set of wireless headphones he'd been hinting at for weeks, and paid for dinner at this overpriced steakhouse my mom insisted on. I didn't mind. But halfway through the night, Ava started talking about wanting to switch majors again. That would be the third time. And just like clockwork, my mom turned to me and said, "You're going to keep helping her, right? You can't just let her waste a year of her life." No, please. No, thank you. Just expectation, entitlement, like I was the family ATM. I tried to laugh it off. I mean, she should probably talk to an advisor first. That was all it took. My mom's expression shifted. That tight, forced smile, gone. "Wow," she said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "You really are full of yourself now, huh? Just because you make a little money doesn't mean you get to talk down to us." I froze. Luke and Ava just stared at their plates. My dad kept sipping his water like nothing had happened. I didn't argue. I just paid the bill, wished Luke a happy birthday again, and left early. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning, I woke up to a group text from my mom. It was sent to me, Ava, and Luke. It read, "Don't bother showing up if you can't act grateful. Noah, this is still a family. And just because you got lucky doesn't mean you get to treat the rest of us like we're beneath you. Maybe take a break from pretending to be better than everyone. We're tired of it." I just stared at my phone. I reread the message 3 times. I felt that tight, bitter squeeze in my chest, the same one I used to get as a teenager, standing outside my own front door because I forgot to do a chore and my mom locked me out as a lesson. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I didn't ask her to take it back. Instead, I closed the message, opened my laptop, logged into the financial aid portals for both of my siblings' schools, and canceled the tuition auto payments. I didn't rage. I didn't write some dramatic message. I just stopped, the same way they always stopped showing up for me. The silence was immediate. 2 days passed. No one said anything, not even a follow-up from Ava or Luke. Then came the voicemails. Luke's first. "Bro, did you forget to send the payment? Financial aid says it didn't go through. Can you check?" Then Ava, "Hey, they said my balance is overdue and there's a hold on my registration. I'm really stressed. Can you please fix it?" Still, I didn't respond. Then came the texts. Then came the calls. Then the angry voicemails, especially from my mom. "Noah, this is ridiculous. You're punishing your own siblings because you can't take a little criticism? Grow up. Don't be petty. You think you're teaching us a lesson? You're just being selfish." By the 5th day, I had 37 missed calls and a family group chat filled with accusations, guilt trips, and desperate pleas to talk. I didn't reply to any of them, because by that point, I was already gone, literally. I had booked a last-minute trip to Maui. I was sitting on the beach that evening, cold drink in hand, my phone face down in the sand next to me, while the sun dipped low over the water like a glowing ember in the sky. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. Not happiness exactly, but something close, something like relief. Still, a part of me kept wondering, how far would they go? Would they show up at my door? Would they try to manipulate me into coming back, into fixing everything again? Or would they finally realize what they'd lost? Because I wasn't their ATM anymore. I was done being the family's silent sponsor. But I had a plan. One that would take everything I'd quietly sacrificed for them and flip it on its head. And the best part? They'd never see it coming. The thing about walking away from your family, especially a family like mine, is that it doesn't happen all at once. Not really. You tell yourself you're done, but the memories keep tapping on your shoulder, whispering guilt into your ear. So while I was sitting there in Maui, watching the waves lap at the shore, I kept checking my phone. Not to reply, just to look. To see what guilt would try to pull me back in. Luke left me a long voicemail that night. Noah, I know Mom's being a fool, but Ava and I didn't ask her to say that stuff. You know we're grateful. We didn't know you were the one paying. She said it was Grandpa's trust fund or something. Please don't do this, man. I almost felt something crack in my chest. Almost. But then I thought about all the times I had done something. Bought Ava a new laptop after hers broke sophomore year. Helped Luke when his car broke down. Covered their books, housing, flights home. Not once did anyone say thanks. Not once did they question where the money came from. They just assumed it was their right. I played Luke's message again. Slower this time. That part, we didn't know you were the one paying. Yeah, that was exactly the problem. After a few days, the tone of the messages started changing. The concern turned to anger. Ava sent me a long, paragraph-heavy text that basically boiled down to, "This is selfish and manipulative, and you're ruining our futures just to prove a point." My mom followed up with a classic move. She looped an extended family. I got a message from Aunt Denise, whom I hadn't heard from in 2 years, saying, "We're all really disappointed in how you're handling this, Noah." Right. Because suddenly I owed my cousin's opinions an explanation for not sponsoring my siblings' lives anymore. It was around that point I started screenshotting things. The texts. The guilt trips. Though we didn't ask you to S and the "you think you're better than us" S. I created a folder called Receipts on my desktop. It wasn't about revenge, at least, not yet. It was about clarity. I wanted to remember how it felt, in case I ever weakened again. And then came the tipping point. My mom called me at work. She never does that. She doesn't even know what I actually do for a living. But she must have gotten my work number from some old email signature or contact list. I was in a meeting when I saw the number pop up. Declined it. Then came the voicemail. "Don't you dare think you're better than this family. Everything we did for you growing up, and this is how you repay us? Pulling the rug out from under your brother and sister when they need you the most? I swear, Noah, if you don't fix this, you're not welcome at Thanksgiving. Or ever again." The rage in her voice didn't even mask the manipulation anymore. And that's when the decision cemented itself in me. Not just about the tuition. About everything. I wasn't going back. Not for Thanksgiving. Not for Christmas. Not for birthdays, weddings, baby showers, funerals. I was done pretending I owed them my life because they didn't completely abandon me. I got back to Seattle a few days later. Back to my quiet apartment, my city skyline, my French press mornings and clutter-free living room. There was a single envelope waiting for me in the mailroom when I returned. It was from my dad. It just said, "Please call your mother. She's not sleeping." No signature. No warmth. Just a task. And it hit me then, more than ever, how thoroughly I had been trained to fix things. To absorb discomfort so they could keep coasting. To feel responsible for everyone's happiness, except my own. That night, I opened the folder labeled Receipts again. And something changed. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. I started writing. I wrote out a letter. No, a statement. Not to them, but for me. A full list of everything I had paid for over the last 4 years. Dates, amounts, reasons. A timeline of every request, every time I said yes when I wanted to say no. I wrote about the guilt, the manipulation, the quiet silences that followed every favor, the lack of gratitude, the expectation. And I ended it with a single sentence. You didn't lose your son because he stopped paying. You lost him because you never noticed when he started. I printed a few copies. Sealed them in envelopes. One for Mom. One for Dad. One each for Ava and Luke. And one I kept in my desk drawer. I mailed them all out on a Tuesday. And then, I waited. 2 days passed. Then 3. No response. I checked my phone more than I want to admit. Half of me expected screaming voicemails again. The other half dreaded silence. But the one message I did get wasn't from any of them. It was from Ava. A single line. "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time, fingers hovering over the screen, hard in my throat. Because depending on what she said next, that was going to decide what kind of brother I'd be going forward. I didn't reply right away. Ava's message, "We need to talk," sat unread in my notifications for almost an hour. Not because I didn't want to know what she had to say, but because I already knew the weight of that message. It wasn't casual. It wasn't, "Hey, can we chat?" It was a crack forming in the wall they'd spent years building, between obligation and affection, between me and them. I walked circles around my apartment, phone in hand. I thought about the version of me that would have answered in a heartbeat, the version that bent over backward just to avoid tension. The one who bought Ava concert tickets when she failed her organic chemistry midterm and cried all week. The one who drove 2 hours to pick up Luke from a party when he lost his wallet and didn't want mom to find out. The one who never asked for anything in return. That version of me would have called her immediately. But I was someone different now, or at least trying to be. Still, something in me cracked. Curiosity? Guilt? I don't know. But eventually, I sat on the couch, took a breath, and typed back. "What do you want to talk about?" 3 dots. Then nothing. I waited. Then they came back. "Can I call you?" I paused, then hit accept. She answered almost instantly. "Noah," she said, and her voice was already shaking. "Yeah, I'm here." There was a long silence on her end. I could hear faint sounds, maybe a dorm hallway, maybe her pacing like I had been. "I didn't know it was you," she said finally. "I swear to God, I didn't know you were paying for everything." "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. At least, part of me did. "But you never asked." Her breath caught a little, like she hadn't expected that. "I guess I didn't," she said. "I thought. Mom said Grandpa left money in a trust. She said it was handled. I didn't want to be a burden." I didn't reply. "You don't believe me," she added quietly. "I believe that's what you told yourself. But it's easier to believe the money just came from nowhere than to ask where it actually came from. And that's the problem." Another silence. Then, "I didn't come here to defend them. I came to say I'm sorry." That stopped me. "I'm sorry for never asking. For assuming. For letting mom talk to you like that. I didn't think it mattered as long as everything was working. I never thought about what it cost you to keep everything running. That's on me." And for the first time since this entire mess started, I felt something real. Not peace. Not forgiveness. But maybe the beginning of something. I let the quiet linger a moment longer. "I appreciate that," I said slowly. "I do. I didn't text to beg for money," she added. "I talked to the financial aid office. I'm getting a loan. I'll figure it out. I needed you to know that I see it now. I see you now." I closed my eyes. Let the words soak in. Let the truth of them settle somewhere deep inside me that had been aching for years. "Thank you," I said again. And this time, I meant it more. We talked for a little while longer. About classes. About her roommates. About the mess Luke was in. His financial aid office hadn't been nearly as helpful, and he was panicking, apparently calling every family member who might have a dime. But I didn't offer to fix it. And Ava didn't ask. Before we hung up, she said something that stuck with me. "Noah, if I'd known it was you paying, I would have acted different." I almost said, "That's the whole point," but I didn't. Instead, I told her, "People shouldn't have to know who's paying to treat them with respect." She was quiet. "Yeah," she said. "I get that now." We ended the call on an okay note. Not warm. Not perfect. But honest. And I thought, maybe that was enough. But that same night, right before bed, I got another message. Not from Ava. From my mom. A screenshot of a past tuition invoice with a text underneath. "So this is what you're holding over us now? Money? Funny how you never acted like this when you needed us." And that, right there, was the moment I knew. This wasn't over. Because I still had something they wanted. And they still had no idea just how much I had kept from them. Not just about money. Not just about boundaries. But about the other thing I had set in motion while I was in Maui. The part of the story no one knew yet. The part that would change everything. I read the message from my mom in complete silence. No anger, no surprise. Just that familiar, cold numbness. The kind you develop after years of being blamed for breathing the wrong way. Her text wasn't new. It was a rerun of the same old script, just dressed in a different font. Accusation. Deflection. A subtle twist of the knife she always kept on standby. But what made it different this time was me. Because while I'd been in Maui, sipping pina coladas and ignoring 37 missed calls, I hadn't just been licking my wounds. I'd been planning. The thing is, when you spend years doing everything for people who never say thank you, you learn to start keeping records. Digital breadcrumbs. Bank transfers. Emails. Statements. I had them all. Every tuition payment. Every book expense. Every laptop, rent deposit, and even that time Luke lost his student ID 3 times in one semester and needed an emergency $500. And when I stopped paying, when the truth came out and they started screaming, I realized they still thought they had power, that they could guilt me, shame me, gaslight me back into submission. But they forgot one thing. I had proof, and I had leverage. See, after I got back from Maui and saw how quickly Ava reached out, not to demand, but to understand, I started to think maybe, just maybe, she was worth salvaging. But the rest of them? No. So I made a decision. One I'd been putting off for years. I called my lawyer. Her name's Veronica. Sharp as a knife and twice as efficient. I first met her when I was negotiating my contract at the tech firm I work for, and I remember thinking, God help the fool who ever tries to mess with her clients. Now, that fool was my own mother. Veronica, I said, I need to talk about creating a formal trust. Something airtight. Something that guarantees not $1 of my estate ever goes to my parents. There was a pause. You expecting to die anytime soon? No, I said, smiling. Just planning ahead. Over the next 2 weeks, we put everything into motion. A new trust, updated will, power of attorney, advanced healthcare directive, the whole 9 yards. I legally removed my parents as emergency contacts, gave that right to a friend I trusted, removed them from my life on paper, not just in principle. But I didn't stop there. I also reached out to both Ava and Luke's schools. I explained, politely, professionally, that I had been covering their tuition under a private agreement, which I was no longer obligated to uphold. I didn't give details, just dates, account numbers, and confirmation that all future payments would be ceased. Luke's school confirmed that his financial aid status was now under review due to unpaid tuition. Ava, to her credit, had already secured a student loan. She followed through like she said she would. Then came the final move. I drafted a long email, not to my parents, but to everyone in the family group chat. The one my mom had used to humiliate me. The one where my aunts, uncles, cousins, and people I hadn't seen since high school felt perfectly comfortable chiming in with opinions about my selfishness. Subject line, clarification. And I wrote, Hi everyone. I hope this message finds you well. I've received a number of texts, voicemails, and emails from several of you over the past few weeks, and I wanted to clear the air about a few things. Over the last 4 years, I have personally and privately paid over $180,000 toward Luke and Ava's college tuition, housing, books, and related expenses. I did this quietly, without announcing it or expecting anything in return. It was never Grandpa's trust or family savings that paid for their education. It was me. I did it because I love my siblings. I believed in them. I wanted them to succeed in ways I had to fight for on my own. However, when I began setting boundaries and was met with hostility, insults, and group messages questioning my character, I made a decision to stop financing a family dynamic built on entitlement and silence. This is not a cry for attention, nor is it revenge. It's simply the end of a chapter. I will no longer be involved in family financial matters, gatherings, or group communications. If you feel compelled to judge me, that's your right. But I'm no longer accepting the role you've assigned me in this story. To those who understand, thank you. To those who don't, I wish you peace. Noah. I hit send and logged out. 10 minutes later, my cousin Jess texted me privately. She told me she had no idea I was the one paying, that she thought I was just being dramatic. She apologized for piling on. She even offered to meet up next time I was in town. But most of the group chat stayed silent. My mom, however, she responded the next morning. An essay, a novel of guilt. Lines like, You don't understand how hard it was raising 3 kids. After all we sacrificed for you. Your siblings are innocent in all this, and now they have to suffer because of you. And the kicker, if you walk away from us now, you'll regret it when we're gone. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a new email thread. To Ava. Subject, Your future. Hey, I meant what I said about not paying for anyone else anymore. But if you ever genuinely need help, not handouts, not hush money, help, like guidance or connections or someone to talk to while you navigate school, I'm here. You're the only one who acted like an adult through all of this. I'm proud of you for that. Stay strong. Finish school. Make your own path. Noah. She replied a few hours later. Thank you. I'm working on it. And thank you for giving me the chance to do it on my own now. 3 weeks passed. No contact from my mom. No voicemails from Luke, though I heard through Jess that he took a semester off to figure things out. No more guilt trips. Just silence. I expected to feel empty. Instead, I felt like I could breathe again. I started hiking again. I finally finished that graphic novel I'd been drawing panels for since college. I began saving up for a trip to Iceland, something I'd always dreamed about, but never let myself do because I was too busy funding other people's dreams. And the biggest change? I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. Cutting ties wasn't a dramatic act of revenge. It was slow, painful healing. It was realizing that family isn't defined by DNA or guilt or who shows up when you succeed. It's defined by who respects you when you fail. I didn't burn the bridge. I just finally stopped patching it up alone and let it collapse into the river where it belonged. When the holidays rolled around, I spent Thanksgiving in a cabin with a few close friends. We cooked. We laughed. We played board games until 2 a.m. No drama. No insults. No one asking for money. Just peace. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt something I hadn't known I was allowed to feel. Free. I was 19 when I realized my family wasn't just dysfunctional. It was quietly, elegantly venomous. Not in the way people throw plates or scream at each other at Thanksgiving. No, my family was the kind that smiled through their teeth and handed out emotional knives in velvet cases, polished and ready. You only noticed the bleeding once you were alone. I'm Parker, and for most of my life, I've kept my head down. I'm the youngest of three, a computer science major, and the kind of kid who fixes Wi-Fi problems and gets asked to make the TV talk to Netflix again. My brother Nathan, 3 years older, works in logistics, while my cousin Caleb, technically my aunt's son, but raised almost like a sibling, somehow drifted into every conversation and space we had, like smoke slipping under doors. Aunt Marlene and my mom were sisters, and despite their fair share of arguments growing up, Mom always tried to keep the peace. That meant inviting Aunt Marlene and Caleb to family dinners, birthdays, even vacations. I never understood why. Marlene had a way of taking up too much space, her opinions filling rooms before she even spoke. And Caleb? He was the golden boy, tall, charming, and a complete parasite wrapped in designer cologne. The first real crack showed at my high school graduation. I hadn't expected much. I'm not flashy. I had decent grades, a few academic awards, nothing wild. But as I stepped down from the stage, diploma in hand, I noticed something strange. My family clapped, except Aunt Marlene, who leaned over to Caleb with a smirk. I caught the eye roll. I shouldn't have cared, but I did. Later that evening, she gave me a thin-lipped smile and said, "Well, at least you're good with computers." That's something. It was wrapped like a compliment, but I felt the sting. I brushed it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe she just didn't know how to talk to people. But then, little things started adding up. At family gatherings, she'd interrupt me mid-sentence or switch topics as soon as I joined a conversation. If I brought up my internship at a software firm, she'd immediately pivot to Caleb's vague business ventures, which always sounded suspiciously like, "I know a guy who's starting something big." Caleb would nod, toss in a line about early investments, and the adults would lap it up. He wore ambition like a tailored suit, even though he never seemed to actually do anything. Meanwhile, I was studying, coding, building projects on GitHub, and working part-time at my uncle's accounting firm to save for school. But to Aunt Marlene, Caleb was the next Jeff Bezos, and I was just good with tech. It didn't help that Caleb treated me like I was 12. He'd ruffle my hair when I walked by, which I hated, or call me the kid in front of others. I was 5 inches taller than him by then, but it didn't matter. I remember one 4th of July barbecue. I brought homemade raspberry lemonade I'd been experimenting with. People seemed to like it. But when someone asked who made it, Caleb quipped, "Probably the same guy who still thinks raspberry pie is food." Everyone laughed. I smiled too, but it stuck with me. Not the joke, that was just stupid. What got me was how fast people were to laugh at me instead of with me. Like I was the harmless background character in the family sitcom. Still, I kept showing up. I told myself it was just part of being the quiet one. I was helping Uncle Jeff at the accounting office, learning the ropes while balancing school and freelance web design gigs. I didn't mind the work. Numbers made sense. People didn't. But I liked Uncle Jeff. He wasn't loud or showy. He taught me things without making me feel like I owed him for it. Around that time, Mom started dropping hints that she might be retiring early. She'd worked for the state for nearly 30 years, and the stress was finally catching up to her. Nathan was doing well, his job was steady, and he was thinking of buying a condo with his girlfriend. That left me, still in school, still working late nights coding apps and managing spreadsheets. I didn't mind carrying more weight if it meant Mom could rest. But I should have known someone else would take notice, someone who'd never lifted a finger unless it was to point blame. One evening, about 2 weeks after my 20th birthday, Mom called a family dinner. Just the core group. Me, her, Nathan, Aunt Marlene, and Caleb. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it had something to do with her retirement plans. She cooked one of her best spreads: baked chicken, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes with garlic butter. Comfort food. It was too quiet at first. The kind of quiet that stretches like a rubber band right before it snaps. Halfway through dinner, Mom cleared her throat. "So," she said gently, "there's something I need to tell you all. I'm stepping down at the end of the quarter. Retirement came a bit sooner than I planned, but I've decided it's time." Nathan smiled and nodded, supportive as always. Caleb made a show of raising his glass, like he was toasting a CEO. But Aunt Marlene? She just pursed her lips. "That's sudden," she said, dabbing her mouth with a cloth napkin. "I hope you've planned for it." "I have," Mom replied. "Parker's been helping with the finances. He's smarter than I am with all that." Aunt Marlene hummed, eyes darting to me. "Well, I hope he's not getting too involved in things beyond his age. You know how young people can be." It was subtle, a throwaway line, but it hit like a punch. I looked at Mom. She didn't flinch. "He's capable," Mom said calmly. "And trustworthy." That was the first time I saw it. The flicker, a tight little twitch at the corner of Aunt Marlene's eye. She wasn't worried about Parker making a mistake. She was worried Parker had access to something she couldn't touch. Later that night, after everyone left, I helped Mom with the dishes. She was quiet, hands moving slowly as if her mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that dinner had been a test. Or maybe a warning. Did something happen? I asked her. She paused, then gave me a tired smile. "Just keep your eyes open, okay?" She didn't say anything else. But I could feel it. Something was coming. Something that smelled like smoke under a closed door. And I wasn't sure yet who had lit the match. The signs weren't obvious at first. Like a squeaky floorboard you only notice when the house is silent. But once Mom said, "Keep your eyes open," I did. And suddenly, I couldn't unsee it. The way Aunt Marlene's tone shifted when talking about money. The questions she asked that didn't sound like small talk anymore. "So how's work at the office? You must see a lot of private info doing what you do, huh? You think Parker's a little young to be dealing with all those numbers?" Always dressed up in a casual voice, like she was just making conversation. But her eyes were sharp, searching. At first, I thought maybe I was being paranoid. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But then one afternoon, I got to the accounting office early and caught the tail end of a conversation between Aunt Marlene and Uncle Jeff. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just froze at the door when I heard her voice. She was in his office, door cracked just slightly. "I'm just saying," she said, "he's what, 20? Kids make mistakes. And he's handling sensitive financials. One misclick, and that could be thousands gone. You wouldn't want something like that traced back to your firm, would you?" My stomach sank. Jeff didn't say much. He's always been a quiet guy, but I heard the uncomfortable pause. Then he said, "Parker's been very thorough. More than most of the new hires I've had." "I'm sure," she replied, a little too sweetly. "Just looking out for family. You know how it is." I slipped away before she saw me and spent the rest of the day pretending I hadn't heard anything. But it stuck in my chest like a splinter. She wasn't just trying to undermine me. She was planting seeds, getting people to doubt me. Why? It didn't take long to find out. A week later, I was helping Mom organize some old boxes in the garage when I found an envelope with an unfamiliar letterhead. Foxwell Trust Holdings. Inside was a brief, professional letter confirming the disbursement of funds from a family trust account, addressed to my mom. It said she had opted to split a significant portion between herself, Aunt Marlene, and Uncle Jeff, a decision made over a decade ago, back when Grandpa passed away and they were settling his affairs. I didn't know there was a trust. I didn't know Mom had any real money tucked away. She'd always been frugal. Coupon clippings, thrift stores, saving electricity like it was gold. I asked her about it, and she just sighed. "It wasn't much," she said. "Your grandfather left what he could. Your aunt got her share. Jeff too. I left mine alone." Figured it'd be for you and Nathan someday. She paused, then added, that's why Marlene's been circling. And just like that, the pieces started clicking together. Marlene wasn't just fishing for gossip. She was trying to figure out if there was still money left, if I had access to it, if I could be maneuvered. Around that time, Caleb started getting real friendly with me, and that's when I knew something was seriously off. Yo, Parker, he said one morning, showing up unannounced at the accounting office. Got time for lunch? I blinked. Yeah, I guess. We went to this overpriced burger place nearby, and he kept the small talk light for a while. Crypto, cars, this startup I might get in on. Then, like clockwork, he shifted. So, working with Uncle Jeff, huh? Must be cool. Bet you see all kinds of numbers flying around. I played dumb. Yeah, lots of receipts and spreadsheets. Riveting stuff. He laughed, but there was tension behind it. But like client accounts, right? Bank stuff? You ever see, like, family files? I just looked at him. Why? No reason, he said too quickly. Just curious. After that, I kept my answers short. We finished lunch, and I told him I had work to get back to. He didn't push, but I could feel it. He was testing the waters, seeing how much I knew, seeing how much I might say. From then on, I started keeping records, screenshots, notes, email logs, just in case, because something told me this wasn't just about snide comments at dinner anymore. This was a hunt, and I was the deer they thought was too slow to notice the wolves. Then came the missing money. Uncle Jeff called me into his office one Friday afternoon. His face was pale, jaw tight. Parker, he said, motioning for me to close the door. We're short $25,000 from the retained earnings account. My heart skipped. What? How? He turned his screen toward me and pulled up the ledger. A withdrawal had been processed the day before, one that didn't match any of our scheduled transactions. I didn't do that, I said immediately. I know, Jeff replied. You're not the only one with access, but you're the only one I know who checks twice before breathing. I looked closer. The authorization ID used matched my login, but I hadn't made the transfer. I wasn't even in the office that day. I had class until 3 and then worked remotely from home. Jeff stared at the screen, then at me. This looks bad, he said, low and serious. I trust you, but if an audit happens, I'll need to show who used what credentials. I nodded, swallowing a rising panic. Can I see the security footage from that day? He hesitated. The office safe? That's a separate system. I don't have clearance to pull it, but we can request it. Do it, I said, voice tight. Please. He agreed, but it would take a few days. That weekend was unbearable. I kept imagining someone, my aunt, Caleb, slipping into the office, using my login somehow. But how would they get it? I never shared it. My password wasn't easy. And then it hit me. 2 weeks earlier, during a family dinner, Caleb had borrowed my laptop. Said he needed to send a quick email because his phone was dead. I handed it over without thinking. I was sitting right there. But I had been logged into the firm portal. If he'd checked, I spent the next 3 days obsessing over browser logs, timestamps, anything I could find. Meanwhile, the silence from Aunt Marlene was deafening. Normally, she'd be texting Mom something passive-aggressive about how quiet Parker's been lately. But now, nothing. Then, midweek, Jeff called me. They reviewed the footage, he said. Come in tomorrow. I barely slept that night. When I arrived, Jeff was waiting with a thumb drive in his hand. He didn't speak, just plugged it into the monitor and clicked play. It was black and white footage from the office hallway, timestamped 2 days ago. Around 11:26 a.m., a figure entered frame. Shorter than me, wearing a hoodie and baseball cap. But the walk, the way he glanced over his shoulder, unmistakable. It was Caleb. He moved quickly, punching in the safe room code like he'd done it 100 times. Which was strange, because the code changed monthly and only a handful of people knew it. Jeff and I included. Jeff looked at me. How'd he know the code? I stared at the screen. I don't know. He paused the video. We have a problem. That evening, I sat across from Mom at the kitchen table. I showed her the footage. Her face was unreadable at first. Then the rage crept in, slow, simmering. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just sat back and whispered, "She used you." We didn't say who. We didn't need to. The next day, we called a family meeting. Nathan came. Aunt Marlene came. Caleb came. Mom set the laptop on the table and said one sentence that cracked the air like thunder. Give back the $25,000 you stole, or leave forever. Aunt Marlene blinked. Excuse me. Nathan stood, backing Mom. You heard her. Marlene narrowed her eyes. This is a setup. You've always hated my son. Mom didn't answer. She just hit play. The footage rolled in silence. At the 10-second mark, Caleb shifted in his chair. At 20 seconds, he swallowed. At 30, his foot tapped once against the floor. When the video ended, Mom looked up. Do you want to explain? Caleb didn't speak. But Marlene scoffed. This proves nothing. That could be anyone. Hoodies? Baseball caps? It's practically a disguise. I slid a photo across the table, a still frame of Caleb's face as he turned toward the camera. You could see his profile. Clear as day. Her eyes flickered. That's when she leaned forward, voice low. If you think this is over, you're wrong. And in that moment, I didn't just see a mother defending her son. I saw a woman who had built her whole life on manipulation and realized the walls were starting to crack. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The living room was quiet after Aunt Marlene's threat. Not dramatic quiet, not shouting quiet, just still. The kind of stillness that feels too full, like everyone's holding their breath and no one wants to be the first to blink. Caleb was slouched back on the couch, arms crossed, pretending to be bored. But his jaw was tight. And Marlene, she wasn't even looking at the laptop anymore. She was staring directly at Mom, not blinking, like she was daring her to make the next move. Mom didn't. Not right away. Instead, she closed the laptop gently, like the footage didn't matter anymore. Her eyes never left Marlene's. You want to make this a fight? She said softly. Fine. But don't lie to my face and pretend your son didn't steal from us. Marlene scoffed, but her voice was colder now. That footage proves nothing. There's no audio. No context. This could be a mistake, or even a setup. Nathan leaned forward. A setup? What? We deep-faked Caleb into the security footage. Come on. You always hated him, she snapped, her voice sharp now, rising. Both of you. You've resented him since he was born because he was actually wanted. Enough, Mom said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. The words hung there. Actually wanted. I blinked. It wasn't just an insult anymore. That was something else. Something darker. What does that mean? I asked. Marlene didn't answer. She just sat back, crossed her legs, and gave me a long, bitter smile. And that was when I felt it. Not confusion. Not even anger. Just a low, sinking dread. Because something had shifted. That night, I went up to my room, but I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about that look in her eyes. Not just anger. Not even fear. It was certainty. Like she still held cards we didn't know about. Like this wasn't the end game. Just a move in the middle of something much bigger. And I was right. 3 days later, I came home to find Mom sitting at the kitchen table, white envelope in her hand, face pale. She looked up when I walked in, but didn't speak right away. She just slid the envelope across to me. Inside was a letter. Legal stationery. Letterhead I recognized, Dad's old attorney. It was a formal notice. Request for reassessment of family trust access and mismanagement of funds. Filed by Aunt Marlene. I stared at it. She's accusing us? I asked slowly. Mom nodded, jaw tight. She's claiming we manipulated the trust. That we're hiding money. That you tampered with the accounts. My hands curled into fists. She's the one who stole. She knows, Mom said. She just doesn't care. She's playing the long game. And suddenly, I got it. This wasn't about $25,000 anymore. This was about control. About tearing down everything she couldn't have. If she couldn't get access to what Grandpa left behind, she'd try to burn it down. I started pacing. She can't prove anything. The footage alone. She doesn't have to prove anything, Mom cut in. She just has to raise enough doubt to trigger a formal audit. If that happens, everything gets frozen. The trust. My accounts. Yours. The firm might even get pulled into it. That's what she wants. But why now? I asked. Why push this far? Mom sighed. Because I told her last month that I was changing the trust. That I'd be splitting it between you and Nathan only. I didn't tell her how much was left, but I made it clear. Caleb wasn't getting a dime. And there it was. I sat down slowly. The pieces clicked into place one by one, and the picture wasn't just ugly, it was calculated. I looked at Mom. She's trying to ruin us. Yes, she said. And if we don't get ahead of it, she just might. That night, we called a meeting with Uncle Jeff. We laid everything out: footage, the legal letter, the patterns of manipulation. Jeff listened in silence, then leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. I knew she was bold, he muttered. But this? She wants a paper trail, I said. She wants it to look like we're the problem. Jeff nodded. I'll speak to my lawyers. But Parker, you need to be careful. If she's using this much pressure, she's not done. He was right. Because the next betrayal wasn't from her. It was from someone I trusted. Nathan. It started small. A weird comment here or there. He'd stop by the house and talk with Mom in the other room. Voices hushed. When I'd walk in, they'd change the subject. At first, I assumed it was stress. That maybe they were just trying to keep me from worrying. But then one afternoon, I came home early from class and heard my name through the door. I'm just saying, if Parker hadn't given him his login, this never would have happened. It was Nathan's voice. Mom responded, firm. He didn't give anyone his login. Caleb snooped. Don't twist it. Yeah, but come on. He let him use his laptop. What did he expect? I stood frozen. Mom defended me, but Nathan wasn't backing down. He's still a kid, Mom. He doesn't get how this stuff works. He's got no idea what kind of mess this is turning into. Don't do this, she said, quiet. I'm just being real, he said. You're betting everything on someone who can't even legally drink yet. That one stung more than it should have. I stepped back before they saw me and went to the park for an hour just to breathe. When I got back, Nathan was gone. I confronted Mom that night. You didn't tell me he thinks it's my fault. She looked tired. He doesn't mean it like that. Yes, he does. She hesitated. Nathan's practical. He doesn't like chaos. He just wants this all to be over. Even if it means throwing me under the bus. Of course not. But her eyes didn't match her voice. That week, things got worse. Aunt Marlene's lawyers sent another letter, this time requesting financial statements from the last 5 years. She wanted full access to anything connected to the trust. The implication was clear. She was preparing to sue. And then I got the email. From Jeff's firm. Subject, credential alert, secondary login used. It listed a timestamp and IP address. I stared at it. It wasn't from Caleb's intrusion. It was recent. 2 days ago. Someone had used my backup credentials from inside the firm's network. I printed the report, heart pounding, and drove straight to Jeff's office. He met me at the door, tense. I was just about to call you. We went to his computer and matched the access logs. Whoever it was had downloaded files from the firm's private folder labeled Trust Documents, Parker/Mother. I looked at Jeff. Who else has access? He hesitated. Aside from me and you. Nathan. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. Nathan? He wouldn't. He doesn't even work here, I said, but my voice was thin now. He's used my terminal before, Jeff said slowly. A few times. I didn't think anything of it. He said he was helping clean up documents for your mom. The rage came slow. Cold. I left the office without saying much and drove home in silence. Nathan was there, feet up on the coffee table, phone in hand, like nothing was wrong. I held up the printed access report. Want to explain this? He looked up, blinked, didn't speak. You went into the trust folder, I said. You copied the files. Nathan set the phone down slowly. I didn't take anything. I just looked. Why? He didn't answer. Why? I repeated. He stood. Because I need to know what we're dealing with. I need to protect this family. And frankly, Parker, you're not ready to handle all this. My hands were shaking now. You gave her something, didn't you? He flinched. You did, I said, breath catching. You gave her something from the files. Something she could use. I didn't give her everything, he muttered. Just a summary. Just enough to keep her from escalating. You betrayed us, I said. You betrayed me. She's family too, he snapped. You think this is black and white. You think you're the only one who matters here. I think I was the only one who didn't sell us out. He didn't speak. Didn't deny it. Didn't apologize. Just picked up his phone, walked out, and slammed the door. That night, I sat on the porch alone, staring into the dark. I wasn't just fighting Marlene anymore. I was fighting my own brother. And I had no idea what he gave her. But I was going to find out. And when I did, I'd make sure the damage stopped with me. It's a strange thing when your world breaks apart quietly. No explosions, no dramatic exits, just a slow collapse. Like watching paint crack on a ceiling you thought was solid. After Nathan walked out, I sat there for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel angry, not at first. I just felt hollow. Like someone had scooped something out of me and left me standing there, pretending I was still whole. The next few days passed in a blur. People talk about hitting rock bottom like it's a moment, a single crash. But for me, it was a slow sinking. Every day, a little lower. Every morning, I checked my email with a pit in my stomach. Every call from the firm made my chest tighten. I started keeping my phone on silent because I couldn't bear the vibration anymore. It felt like a warning shot every time. Uncle Jeff tried to keep me in the loop, but he was under pressure too. The firm's partners had found out about the audit requests and the footage, and they were panicking. One of them, a gray-haired man named Martin who always wore loafers without socks, pulled Jeff into a meeting and told him flat out, "You bring that boy in again, you're dragging us all down with you." Jeff didn't fire me, but he stopped copying me on emails. And that hurt more than I expected. I still showed up. I still worked. But I was invisible now. The kid who got his login stolen. The liability. The potential scandal. Meanwhile, at home, Mom was unraveling. Slowly. She tried to stay strong, cooking, folding laundry, keeping her tone calm. But I saw the bags under her eyes. I heard the way her voice caught sometimes when she thought I wasn't listening. She'd been holding this family together with duct tape and goodwill for years, and now everything was slipping out from under her. One night, I found her in the living room, staring at an old photo of Grandpa. She didn't notice me at first. "He'd be ashamed of this," she said softly. "Of all of us." I sat down next to her and didn't say anything. A week later, the final blow came. The trust was officially frozen. Not permanently, but enough. The bank, after reviewing the conflicting claims and legal threats, issued a hold on the account pending a full audit and resolution of disputed control, which meant no access, no funds, no way for Mom to pay for the new roof we needed, no way to cover the medical bill for her blood pressure meds, which had gone up after her insurance change, no tuition support for my next semester. Nothing. We were locked out of her own father's legacy. And the worst part? Nathan didn't even come by. Not to check in. Not to explain. Not even to argue. Just vanished. I heard through a mutual friend that he and his girlfriend had moved forward with their condo purchase. Said something about starting fresh. Clean break. I didn't know if that meant from Mom and me, or from the whole situation. It didn't matter. The damage was done. So I did what I always did. I worked. I threw myself into code. I finished every freelance project I could find. Web redesigns for local businesses, data scrubbing for a logistics firm, even some sketchy Excel automation jobs that paid well and asked no questions. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. I stopped replying to texts unless they were from clients. I just kept moving. Because if I stopped, even for a second, I was afraid everything would collapse on top of me. And through it all, Aunt Marlene stayed silent. She didn't show up, didn't call, didn't gloat, but I knew she was watching. I could feel it, like a shadow just out of view. Then one day, I found out why. I was delivering an invoice to a client downtown, a law firm that needed a document portal redesigned, when I ran into Caleb. Literally. He came around the corner of the building just as I was stepping out. We both froze. He was wearing a suit, slightly too large, probably borrowed. His face was clean-shaven, his hair slicked back. He looked smug. I gave him a nod, tried to step past, but he blocked my path. "You still doing the whole, hard-working computer guy routine?" he asked, voice dripping with fake innocence. "Excuse me," I said, trying to brush past. But he wasn't done. "Mom says you're falling apart. That the trust got frozen. That must sting." I turned to face him fully. "Why are you here?" He smiled. "Client meeting. Some people actually respect my business ideas." I didn't reply. He leaned in slightly. "You know, Parker, I didn't have to do any of this. You brought it on yourself. Always acting like you're better. Like you're the only one Grandpa would have wanted to leave things to." I stared at him. "I never said that." "You didn't have to," he said, smirking. "Everyone could tell. You and your little spreadsheets. Your perfect GPA. Your whole honors student with a heart of gold act." I clenched my fists. "You stole from us." He shrugged. "You can't steal what you were never going to get. It's just money, Parker. You think you're the hero, but all you ever were was convenient." And with that, he walked past me into the building, whistling. I stood there for a long time. Not angry, not broken, just cold. Because that was when it clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family falling apart. This was war. And I'd been playing defense the whole time. I went home that night and started digging. Not emotionally, not philosophically. Technically, Caleb had always been slippery. Vague business ventures, Instagram posts showing off rented cars, shady investments, with zero paper trails. But now I had a reason to follow the trail. And I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it to protect Mom. To protect what was left. I started with old messages, emails from him to me, to Mom, even social media DMs. I found patterns, phrases he reused, email signatures that looked professional but were riddled with inconsistencies. I ran his domains through public WHOS lookups, tracked hosting providers, ran pings, and DNS traces. One domain, supposedly the site for his tech startup, had been registered under a fake name. But the IP history showed a different story. It had once been hosted on a private server, the same block of IPs used by a small co-working space downtown. I recognized the name. It was where he'd once asked me to help set up his email, months ago, back when we were still family. I kept going. I called in favors from old classmates, people working in IT and cybersecurity. I didn't tell them why, just said I needed help tracking some digital footprints for a client. And what I found, it wasn't just shady. It was criminal. Fake investors, inflated revenue reports, dummy accounts showing money that never existed. And best of all, the kicker was a ledger file, poorly hidden, but there, with a line item labeled FT transfer, safe withdrawal, 25K, timestamped exactly 2 days before the trust freeze. I didn't know how he got the code. Not yet. But I knew now that he logged the theft in his own system. Maybe he thought it was clever. Maybe he thought no one would ever find it. He was wrong. I compiled everything, saved it to a secure drive, set up an encrypted backup on a cloud server under a pseudonym. And then, I waited. Because the next time he or Marlene came sniffing around, I wanted to be ready. But I also knew something else. This wasn't enough. This wasn't just about proving they were liars. This was about showing them I'd stopped playing by their rules. That I wasn't the quiet, harmless kid anymore. I was walking away from the wreckage of our family. But I wasn't walking empty-handed. And the next move would be mine. I didn't plan for things to change overnight. I just planned for them to stop falling apart. But the strange thing about rock bottom is that once you're there, really there, bruised and burned and stripped down to your last nerve, every small win feels like a handhold. And eventually, you start to climb. I was still working 16-hour days, still eating microwaved rice and eggs 4 nights a week, still dodging Mom's worried glances and Nathan's silence like landmines. But I had something now. A direction. A mission. A feeling I hadn't had in months. Leverage. I started with the portfolio. The fake one. Not to deceive, but to protect. I built a new personal website. Simple, clean, but loaded with the right keywords. Freelance tech consultant. Data security specialist. Discrete project handling. I wasn't lying. Not really. Everything I was doing, tracing Caleb's shady business dealings, following his digital paper trail, organizing evidence, was, in its own weird way, a kind of consultation. I just wasn't billing him for it. I posted the site to a few private Discord groups, some freelancer networks, and even an anonymous subreddit I used to lurk in during college. I made a fake testimonial or two to get it rolling, and within a week, I had my first client, a small e-commerce site owner who'd been hacked and needed help recovering their customer list. I charged him $500. He paid in 24 hours. That money didn't solve everything, but it did something else. It reminded me that I wasn't helpless. I wasn't stuck waiting for Marlene to make the next move or Nathan to crawl back with half an apology. I had skills. I had evidence. And I had time. With the audit still pending, the trust account frozen, and Mom's retirement plans in limbo, I knew I couldn't fix everything at once. But I could build something. Something real. Something mine. So I did. By the end of the month, I had 4 clients. 2 were basic data cleanup jobs. 1 was a small business that wanted to migrate to a secure invoicing platform, and 1, a big one, was a former startup CEO who needed help scrubbing his name from a very public scandal involving stolen crypto. I charged him $2,000. He didn't blink. It wasn't glamorous work. Half of it was automated. The other half was research, scripts, and staying up late on forums figuring out how to bypass third-party caches. But it paid. More than that, it gave me control. And the whole time, I kept tabs on Caleb. Quietly. He'd gone quiet on social media. No more flashy dinners or cryptic, big things coming soon tweets. That alone was suspicious. He wasn't the type to go dark unless something was brewing, or unless he'd been told to lay low. I cross-referenced the accounts he still had active, ran his email through a breach database, and found a string of matching usernames tied to an obscure crypto marketplace registered offshore. I couldn't get access to the wallet transactions directly, but I flagged a few of the pseudonyms and tracked them across different forums. One of them, Z3Virus, posted on a Black Hat message board asking for help laundering large amounts of USDT through NFTs. The kicker? They posted a screenshot. It was cropped carefully, but not carefully enough. The top corner showed a timestamp that matched the exact hour Caleb had left the co-working space last month. I archived the thread, saved everything, took screenshots, and even recorded a short screen capture scrolling through the discussion, just in case it got wiped later. This was bigger than I thought. He wasn't just stealing from family. He was laundering money. Meanwhile, life at home shifted too. Mom was still quiet, but she walked lighter now. She didn't say much, but she noticed the way our bills started getting paid early. The way I offered to cover groceries without hesitation. The way I installed a better security system in the house and upgraded our Wi-Fi without asking for permission. She didn't question it. She just looked at me one night while we were eating, her hand wrapped around a warm mug of tea, and said, "You're not a kid anymore, are you?" I smiled. Not for a long time. She nodded once, slowly, and didn't say anything else. But I saw the corners of her eyes crease the way they used to when she was proud of me as a kid. That was worth more than anything I'd earned online. But the real turning point came when I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in weeks. Nathan. It was short. He didn't apologize. Didn't explain. Just asked if I was home. Said he needed to talk. He came by later that night, looking older somehow. Not tired, just subdued. Like someone who realized too late that the bridge he burned wasn't as far behind him as he thought. He sat at the kitchen table, same spot where everything had started. Same spot where the $25,000 was first brought up. "I messed up," he said. "I waited. I thought I was protecting Mom. Thought if I gave Marlene something, just something small, she'd back off." She said all she wanted was clarity. Just enough to make sure you weren't manipulating things. I stayed quiet. "But that wasn't true," he added. "She twisted it. Used it to claim Mom was hiding money, that you forged documents. She's pushing for full control now. Of the trust. Of everything." I looked at him, expression blank. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I found out what she's doing. What Caleb's doing." He pulled a USB from his pocket and slid it across the table. "I didn't mean to spy," he said. "But I started checking some of the files I shared with her. One of them had metadata linking back to a crypto wallet. I followed it. It's Caleb's. And it's bad. I didn't pick up the USB. I didn't need to. I already know," I said. Nathan blinked. "What?" "I've been tracking him for a month." He leaned back, eyes wide. "You what?" I nodded. "I have everything. Every fake domain. Every shell company. Every wallet he used to move the money. I have proof that he took the $25K, laundered it through a fake NFT exchange, then moved it offshore." Nathan just stared at me. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked finally. I gave him a long look. "Because you didn't trust me." He looked down. Guilty. I was scared. "I know," I said. "But fear doesn't excuse betrayal. I didn't mean to betray you. But you did." The silence stretched again. Finally, he said, "So what now?" I took a breath. "I'm not just going to expose them," I said. "I'm going to bury them. Legally. Publicly. Permanently." Nathan looked nervous. "You're sure?" "I'm done being the quiet one. The background character. The good kid everyone underestimates." He didn't respond. And honestly, I didn't need him to. That night, I stayed up building something new. A secure, hidden database accessible only by encrypted key. I uploaded everything I had, documents, footage, transactions, forum screenshots, metadata, testimonials, witness logs. I created a master folder and labeled it Operation Dustpan, because I wasn't just going to sweep up this mess. I was going to clean house. And for the first time in months, I slept easy. Because for once, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. And this time, I wouldn't just survive. I'd win. The next few weeks felt like living in the eye of a storm. Outwardly, everything seemed calm. But underneath the surface, I was quietly laying the foundation for something that would change everything. The chaos surrounding the frozen trust the lawsuit threats, and Caleb's theft had put me through every emotional ringer possible. Anger, guilt, grief, helplessness. But now, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. I was no longer reacting to their moves. I was building my own. I called it Operation Dustpan half-jokingly, but it became more than just a clever name. It became my blueprint for burning down everything Aunt Marlene and Caleb had built on lies. First, I needed someone who could take this from a digital dossier to a legal weapon. That meant finding a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone sharp enough to understand both family law and digital fraud. Uncle Jeff had a few connections he trusted, and one name came up more than once: Darla Penrose. I met Darla on a rainy Tuesday in a modest office above a dental clinic. She didn't look like the high-powered attorneys I'd imagined. No power suits, no dramatic hair flip, just a practical bun, a pressed blouse, and a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. She listened as I explained everything: the theft, the audit, the family drama, the manipulation. When I got to the part about Caleb laundering money through NFTs, she held up a hand. "You have proof." I nodded. "All backed up, cross-referenced, time-stamped. I've got screen captures, access logs, forum threads, even wallet activity with his initials coded into the metadata." Her eyes lit up just slightly. "And you've stored this securely?" "Multiple encrypted backups. One local, one in the cloud under a dummy shell, one printed and locked in a fireproof safe." Now she smiled, just a little. "You're not just smart, Parker. You're dangerous." She agreed to take the case. Not just to help my mom recover control of the trust, but to prepare a formal fraud complaint against Caleb. Possibly even a civil suit if the funds couldn't be returned quietly. But that wasn't the most interesting part. Because as we dug deeper, Darla discovered something unexpected. While researching the trust documents Nathan had shared with Aunt Marlene, she found a clause tucked deep into the original estate planning papers. It was old, drafted decades ago by Grandpa when he first established the trust. It read like boilerplate legalese, but the implications were huge. The clause stated that if any named beneficiary were found guilty of criminal behavior specifically involving family assets, their share of the trust would be forfeit. Gone. Null and void. That meant if we could prove Caleb stole from the trust, even just the $25,000, that would legally disqualify him from ever inheriting another cent. And here's the kicker. If a disqualification occurred, that beneficiary's share would automatically be redistributed evenly among the remaining parties. Which meant, if Caleb went down, his slice would go back to Mom and Uncle Jeff. I stared at the clause, stunned. This changes everything," I said. Darla nodded. "Exactly. Marlene is fighting tooth and nail for access, but she doesn't realize her son is the ticking time bomb that could cost her everything." For the first time in a long time, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was poetic. And we weren't done. Darla had connections to a small but fierce investigative firm, retired analysts, forensic accountants, and one former IRS fraud investigator. She brought them in for a 2-week dig, and what they found turned Operation Dustpan from a cleanup into a full demolition. Caleb had done this before. Not on the same scale, and not to family. But 2 years ago, while supposedly working on a startup, he had funneled money from a college friend's seed investment into a fake consulting company that didn't exist. The friend never pressed charges. Rumor was, Marlene paid him off to keep it quiet, but the paper trail was still there. Bank transfers, invoices, matching IP addresses. We had it all. But I didn't want to go nuclear just yet. Not until we knew exactly what Marlene was planning. So I took a risk. I contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Avery, my cousin on my dad's side. She worked at a legal firm that occasionally crossed paths with high-net-worth estate cases. I didn't think she was close to Marlene, but I knew she had contacts who were. I met her for coffee under the pretense of catching up. We talked about life, about Dad, gone almost 10 years now, about the mess the family had become. I never outright asked her to spy, but she read between the lines. "You want to know what's being said behind closed doors?" she said. I didn't answer. She leaned in, voice low. "Well, here's what I have heard. Marlene's lawyer is trying to position her as co-trustee. If she succeeds, she gets immediate access to records, voting power over the distribution, and the ability to freeze accounts herself. No court required." My blood ran cold. "She could lock us out completely?" I asked. Avery nodded. "It's a long shot, but not impossible, especially if Nathan supports her. He wouldn't, but I didn't finish the sentence because I wasn't sure anymore. That night, I called Darla and relayed everything. She paused on the line, then said, if she gets co-trustee status, we're back at square one. We need to move faster. And so we did. By now, I had turned my freelance side hustle into a full-time consulting pipeline. Clients were referring others. One crypto project even offered me equity in exchange for a security audit, which I accepted. I started stacking funds in a separate account under a newly registered LLC, Dustpan Digital Solutions. I had leverage. I had funding. I had a paper trail leading straight to Caleb's corruption and a legal team ready to present it. But I needed one final piece. Something that would not just expose Caleb, but pull Marlene into the spotlight with him. And as it turns out, Caleb gave it to me without even realizing. I was combing through old group chat logs, back when we were all in a family WhatsApp group, mostly sharing birthday invites and memes, when I found something odd. A PDF, sent by Caleb about a year ago, titled FamilyDocs.pdf. I had ignored it at the time, probably thought it was a flyer or something trivial. But I opened it now and nearly dropped my coffee. It was a scanned copy of an old tax return, but not his. It was Mom's. Her full name, SSN, and earnings. A full breakdown of deductions and asset holdings. Attached. In a group chat. He had deleted the message minutes later, probably realized what he'd done. But I had downloaded it. And even though I didn't remember doing so, my archive folder had the original file. I ran metadata and found the smoking gun. The original file wasn't scanned by Caleb. It was scanned on Marlene's printer. Her name, her IP. Even the model of the printer was embedded in the file's metadata. That's when it all clicked. They'd been digging into Mom's records for months before the trust fight started. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't panic. It was premeditated. Marlene had accessed Mom's personal records without permission, and Caleb had used them to build their case. That was illegal in multiple ways. And now I had proof. I emailed Darla the file. 5 minutes later, she called me. Her voice was electric. This is it, she said. This is your hammer. I nodded. So what do we do next? She smiled. Now we show them what happens when you back the quiet kid into a corner. And just like that, Operation Dustpan shifted into its final phase. Because this wasn't just setup anymore. This was checkmate in motion. I didn't announce the revenge. I didn't post a cryptic, they'll regret crossing me message. I didn't even tell Mom what I was about to do. Because this wasn't about theatrics. It was about justice. It was about precision. And it started with a letter. Not from me, but from Darla. Certified. Formal. Strategically timed. Marlene and her attorney received it on a Tuesday morning. The letter opened with a calm, professional tone, almost sterile. It acknowledged their petition to claim co-trustee status of the family trust and outlined the upcoming hearing date. But that wasn't the important part. The important part was the attached notice of pending fraud investigation, complete with digital evidence logs, metadata forensics, and a formal declaration from the cybersecurity team detailing Caleb's involvement in laundering the stolen $25,000. It included footage of Caleb entering the safe room, system logs showing access to my login credentials, records of offshore crypto wallets traced to his digital alias, screenshots of the NFT laundering scheme, and most damningly, the group chat PDF with Mom's tax records, scanned from Marlene's own printer. It was a legal shot across the bow, but that wasn't the real play. This was 3 hours after Marlene received the letter. Darla filed a request for disqualification of beneficiary, citing Clause 9B of Grandpa's trust. The clause that stated any beneficiary proven to have committed criminal or unethical activity involving trust funds would be permanently removed, and their portion redistributed to the remaining heirs. Caleb was the first domino, but we weren't done. At the same time, Darla submitted a formal cease and desist against Marlene herself for illegal access to private tax documents, citing potential violations of federal privacy laws and interference with estate proceedings. And then, just for good measure, we had the letter forwarded to the bank holding the trust, the firm reviewing the audit, the partners at Uncle Jeff's company, and Nathan, not out of spite, out of strategy, because silence gives power to manipulators. But transparency? That's where they collapse. The fallout started fast. First, the bank issued a formal hold on Marlene's petition for co-trustee status, citing pending legal investigation. That meant she could no longer poke around inside the trust or request records. Second, her attorney, clearly blindsided, called Darla and tried to bluff. "This is all circumstantial," he said. Darla replied with 5 words that made me wish I'd been there to see it. "We welcome the criminal trial." 2 days later, Marlene fired him. By the end of the week, the bank initiated a forensic audit, but not of my mom, of Caleb. And that's when the cracks turned into fractures. We didn't hear from them directly, but the signals were there. Caleb deleted his Twitter account. His car, which had been leased under one of his shell companies, was repossessed. And that startup he'd been bragging about? It vanished overnight. The domain expired. Social's gone. No forwarding page. Just a dead site with a 403 error. Then came the phone call. I was sitting in my room, finishing up a project for one of my new clients, a subscription box brand that needed a payment security upgrade, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But I picked up. It was Caleb. His voice was strained. Edgy. Like someone trying to sound calm while their house burned down around them. "Parker," he said. "We need to talk." I said nothing. "I know you're behind this," he continued. "The footage. The logs. The IRS guy breathing down my neck. You think you've won, but you don't know what you're playing with." I stayed silent. He grew more desperate. "You don't want to go to war with our family, Parker. You think this makes you some kind of hero?" That's when I spoke. Calm. Even. "I'm not a hero, Caleb. I'm the guy who got tired of letting you walk all over the people who actually cared about this family." He exhaled sharply. "Do you know what you've done? You've ruined me." I didn't flinch. "I didn't ruin you. You did that yourself." Then I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't, because the final twist hadn't landed yet. 2 weeks later, Darla called with something new. The forensic audit had turned up unreported income in Caleb's name. Income that couldn't be explained by freelance gigs or consulting work. It matched the stolen trust funds almost exactly. What made it worse? That income had been transferred through an account partially owned by Marlene. That was the final nail. Marlene was no longer just guilty by association. She was implicated. Darla filed a motion for permanent removal of trustee candidate and attached the full audit report. Within a week, the bank confirmed. Caleb was removed from the trust entirely. His share was redistributed, 50% to Mom, 50% to Uncle Jeff. Marlene's petition was denied indefinitely, and all future trust oversight would be handled by a neutral third-party firm, at Caleb and Marlene's expense. Mom didn't gloat. She didn't cry either. She just sat in the garden that afternoon, watching the wind move through the trees, and said, "Your grandfather would be proud of you." And for the first time since this all began, I believed her. But there was one last thing. Something I'd waited to do until the dust had settled. I called Nathan. He didn't answer. So I left a voicemail. "Hey, I don't know where we stand, but I thought you should know. Mom's safe. The trust is secure. Caleb and Marlene won't be touching it again. I'm not calling to fight. I just wanted you to know that it's over. And we're okay." I don't know if he ever listened to it. I don't need to. Because this revenge, it wasn't about getting even. It was about getting free. And we were finally free. Almost. But there was one last conversation that needed to happen. And I knew exactly where to have it. In person. With the woman who started it all. Aunt Marlene. Because before I walked away for good, she needed to hear it from me. And what I had to say was going to leave her speechless. I decided to meet Aunt Marlene face to face. Not for drama. Not to yell or gloat or rub salt into the wounds she and Caleb had inflicted. I just needed her to see what it looked like when her schemes failed. When the quiet kid she overlooked, dismissed, mocked, underestimated, stared her down with nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. She agreed to the meeting surprisingly quickly. Maybe she thought she still had some kind of upper hand. Maybe she assumed I'd come crawling, asking for peace. Maybe she believed the story she'd always told herself, that she was the center of this family and we were just orbiting her. We met at a cafe downtown, one of those posh, minimalist places with recycled wood tables and overpriced scones. She arrived 10 minutes late in a beige trench coat and sunglasses, like she was auditioning for a spy movie. "No, Caleb." She sat across from me and didn't smile. "You look tired," she said. I didn't respond. She pulled off her sunglasses slowly. Her eyes were sharp, but different now. Not smug. Not condescending. Cautious. "You wanted to talk?" she asked. I nodded. Took out my phone. Slid it across the table. The screen was paused on a video file, one of the dozens we'd gathered during the investigation. It was the footage of Caleb entering the safe room at Uncle Jeff's office. Clear as day, time-stamped, irrefutable. I hit play. She didn't flinch, just watched, jaw tight. When it ended, I said, "You knew." She didn't deny it. Instead, she crossed her arms and leaned back. "You're very proud of yourself, aren't you?" "No," I said, "but I'm proud of Mom." Her eyebrow twitched. She never deserved what you did to her. The lies, the sabotage, the invasion of her privacy. And the worst part? You involved your son in it. You turned him into your weapon. She looked away. "I didn't turn him into anything," she muttered. "He made his own choices." I leaned forward. "So did you." A pause. Then she said, "Do you think this is justice, Parker? You think cutting us out of the trust, humiliating us, ruining our names, you think any of that makes you better than us?" "I don't care if I'm better," I said. "I care that you can't hurt us anymore." Her mouth opened, then shut again. I could see her fighting for something to say. A counter. A defense. Nothing came. "You'll lose everything," she said finally. "Quiet now? That money, those assets, you think they'll protect you? It never ends with money. It never ends with winning. Sooner or later, someone will come for you, Parker." I smiled. Not because I was amused, but because I'd finally understood her. She wasn't angry because she lost. She was terrified because someone like me, a quiet, polite, overlooked kid, had the power to take her down. She wasn't used to losing control. And now, she had none. "No one's coming for me," I said. Because I didn't lie. I didn't steal. I didn't manipulate anyone. I stood up and slid the phone back into my pocket. "I came here to say goodbye," I added. "You and Caleb, you're done. He's being investigated for fraud. You've been barred from touching the trust ever again. You'll probably get a fine for violating federal privacy laws. Maybe worse." She swallowed hard, but her face stayed frozen. "You think you won because you get to keep the money?" she asked bitterly. "No," I said. "I won because we finally got you out of our lives." She didn't reply. I turned and walked out, and I didn't look back. The fallout came fast. Caleb was formally charged with wire fraud and unlawful access to financial systems. Turns out, one of his dummy crypto wallets had been flagged on a watch list months ago, and Darla's report gave investigators the push they needed. He didn't end up in prison. Not yet. But he was slapped with over $60,000 in restitution, banned from opening any new business accounts, and forced to settle privately with multiple investors he'd duped. One of them, ironically, was the same college friend Marlene had paid off 2 years prior. That one came back with interest. Marlene didn't escape unscathed. She was fined for unlawful access to private tax records and permanently barred from serving on any family-controlled assets, trusts, or estate matters. Her social reputation? Gone. Word spread quietly but effectively through the family network. She stopped getting invites to weddings, holidays, reunions. Uncle Jeff cut ties. Her own sister, my mom, never spoke to her again. And Nathan? He came back. Not with an apology at first, but with silence. He started showing up again, offering to help around the house, bringing groceries, picking up Mom's prescriptions, trying to fix what he'd broken, not with words, but with actions. It took time, but eventually we talked. And when we did, I didn't say, "I told you so." I just said, "Next time, trust me." And he nodded. Mom's life finally settled. She kept her half of the trust, used some of it to pay off the house, gave the rest to a financial advisor, and took a real vacation for the first time in decades. She came back tan, rested, and lighter than I'd seen her in years. As for me, I built Dustpan Digital into a real business. I took on better clients, hired a part-time developer, and moved into a small office near campus. The same people who once saw me as just a kid were now asking me for security consultations, project audits, and long-term contracts. I wasn't the background character anymore. I was the one writing the script. A few months later, I got one final message. A short email. No subject line. From Caleb. To me. Body. You were never supposed to be the one to win. Enjoy it while it lasts. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because I was enjoying it. Not the money. Not the revenge. But the silence. The peace. The safety. The knowledge that no one was going to hurt my mom again. That no one was ever going to make me doubt myself again. And that sometimes, the quiet kid wins.